If all goes as planned, which it kind of has to, this will be one of the shortest videos I've ever filmed because I only have 20 minutes and then I have to run out the door. I'm on my way to an event. Actually, I'm going to an event with Simbri. It's a Derma E event and it's a dinner. This box came in the mail yesterday and I have refrained from opening it. It is the one and only thing I've purchased with my beauty budget this month. It's a LISA ELDRIDGE lipstick. I bought Velvet Fawn, which is the lightest of her new range. I think it will go really well with this look. I'm just wearing my kind of go-to sort of like one color all over the lid eye. So I feel like this is kind of the perfect look for a lipstick like this. I want to wear it to the event, but I promised myself I would open it on camera and do like a quick first impressions and just share my excitement with you. So I want to do that and I'm going to do it fast. It's beautifully designed as it would be. The velvet texture is really interesting. It looks so uniform and velvet is so not uniform. Velvet is so organic looking. It's so just lush and crushed and strange. And really close up, this just looks like a bunch of tiny pinpricks or like a bunch of tiny dots. So that's really interesting. I don't really feel as kind of amazed or as precious about the velvet exterior of this lipstick as I was expecting to based on how other people have reacted to it. It is very beautiful and original, but I'm not looking at it like, whoa, it looks just like velvet. It's blowing my mind. But the color is absolutely stunning. I'm going to go ahead and try it on. All right, so I went on with quite a thin layer, kind of like a stain level layer, which I think is good for this overall look. I just dyed my eyebrows, so the combination of my dark brows and the way I've done my eyes means that the top half of my face looks quite made up. And so I went really light with the base and I want to go light with the lips too. I have to say, it looks a little pinker than I was expecting based on how it looks when it's compared to the other swatches of the other velvet lipsticks. I was expecting it to look more brown. I think that I really love a brown nude. I really lean into that like quite brown territory, and I'm always looking for a nude that's light enough to not look vampy on me, but that's also brown. So right here is Velvet Fawn, and I know my lighting is really contrasty right now because it's so dark out, but I'm hoping that you can at least see the differences between them. That right there is Velvet Fawn, and then the first thing I wanted to swatch next to it was my Givenchy lip pencil in number 9, Lip Brown. That is basically my perfect nude, and when I want a super neutral lip that's just a little bit defined, I always put that lip pencil all over my lips. And then Maybelline Raw Chocolate is pretty much the lipstick equivalent of the Givenchy lip pencil that I love so much. So you can see that both of those are just a bit more brown, a bit more yellow than the slight peachiness comparatively of Velvet Fawn. And then here on the end, I swatched NYX London, the soft matte lip cream. It's the lightest and the yellowest of them all. So this is going to be kind of like a nude pink on me. This is partly because of my undertone specifically. It does look beautiful. It looks beautiful on the complexion, but it doesn't have that sort of slightly edgy browniness. It doesn't look as much like a 90s brown on me as I thought it would based on the swatches I had seen and based on what Lisa said. It's nice to have just swatched around really quickly and learned that I actually don't have anything like this. I haven't done that thing where I was buying like a lip color that I already have 3 times over. I was expecting it to be more like Maybelline Raw Chocolate, but if it had been, then I would have just had the same color in 2 different formulas, and I kind of prefer having like a Lisa Eldridge designed color in the Lisa Eldridge designed formula. That is something that is new to me and distinctive to my collection. So any disappointment that I am feeling at the fact that it's not really a brown for me is balanced out by the fact that it is giving me something new that is light enough to be kind of a non-dramatic nude on me. And it'll be fun going forward to kind of see how this fits into the way that I do my makeup on a daily basis, because I haven't had anything like this to play around with really ever. Because I don't tend to buy things that lean a little bit pink on me. It feels amazing. It feels creamy in a way that belies the matteness, or I guess you could say the matte look of it belies the creaminess. They just rarely go hand in hand like this. But it doesn't feel silicone-y. I feel like the Charlotte Tilbury Matte Revolution formula has that trick as well. It looks matte, but doesn't feel matte, but it feels a little silicone-y to me, and this doesn't feel silicone-y to me. So I'm looking forward to to seeing how it wears. In this video, I just wanted to capture the excitement of unboxing the one thing that I've purchased this month and wearing it out to dinner. And I just wanted to like do that along with you because I feel like this is a really exciting choice for my budget and totally relevant to the contents of my channel. Amazing news, my Lisa Eldridge Velvet Lipstick arrived in the mail, so I'm now filming the video about it. My question about this was singular. I only had one question about it, which had to do with its color. And that's because this is the second lipstick in this formula that I own. I knew what I was buying in every way other than the color. The color of this, which is Velvet Dragon, it should be in the title, like I think you already know if you clicked on the video, Velvet Dragon is the one that I bought. The color of this, the way that she described it, it's my perfect red. And I suspected, and spoiler alert, kind of turned out to be right, I suspected that I didn't really have this perfect red in a good solid bullet lipstick formula. I have it in some semi-sheer or shinier, more emollient, like lip glossy formulas. As you'll see when I show you the swatch comparisons, I have something similar to this, but it didn't have like a rich, rusty, that really sort of vibrant, sensual, not quite red, or like, you know, dirty red. I didn't really quite have that rusty, dirty red in a real lipstick, let alone a matte lipstick formula. I took some really clear overhead swatch footage, but before we cut to that, I'm gonna go ahead and apply it for you here on camera so that you can see what it looks like. So there it is applied. It goes on really beautiful. It's like a rich, it's not super thick in that it's not goopy. Like I feel like when I say thick, it kind of implies it's like something goopy or that you're gonna get a coat that you didn't bargain for, like a coat on your lips that you didn't bargain for. It's definitely not thick in that way. It just feels quite rich. It feels just like a rich matte cream going on. And you know, because it's matte, it's not really nourishing feeling. It's not a super drying matte, like it doesn't feel like my lips are going to just crinkle up underneath it or something, but it's definitely like a pigmented cream. You know what I mean? It feels like a little bit of a dusky texture because it has that matte finish. There's no shine to it. So even though there is some emollients in that it is a cream, it does not feel particularly emollient. I find though that it doesn't dry the lips out throughout the day. It's pretty easy to wear and it definitely feels like it sets onto the lips. It's sturdy but without doing like a full-on liquid lipstick dry down. I like a soft lip line, which is why I was smudging around the edges with my fingertips. I really like to use my fingertip to take whatever lip product I am applying and kind of do a blurred overline just on the rim around my lips, but without anything kind of harsh there. So on the website, it says that Velvet Dragon is a muted, burnt, soft, rusty red with warm yellow undertones. Inspiration for this shade comes from cinnabar, a pigment that has been used for ancient lacquering of ornaments and jewelry for thousands of years. So it's that yellow, it's that rusty, warm, soft, yellow undertoned red that I really, really love. There's something like a bit burnt about it, a bit singed, and the fact that it's yellow toned makes it work well with my relatively warm and very, very pale complexion. I just love this kind of red. I feel like it has the potential to become my best red lipstick, like the one red lipstick that I reach for on all the occasions when I want just like a strong matte red. It's my perfect red. So I'm continuing to look at the website. It says the formulation is a creamy, hydrating matte with a slight sheen. It's not a flat matte. I would agree with that. And it says the color is long wearing and not drying to the lips. I agree with that almost entirely wholeheartedly. I think that after I have dry skin and I have dry lips, so after I wear this for a while, when I apply it, it definitely doesn't feel like a super flat, like insanely flat, intense matte that's like canceling all reflection. It definitely does have that slight emollients to it. But after I've worn it for a while, I feel like my lips have sort of soaked in what moisture there was to soak in, and I feel like it becomes really quite matte. I don't think that the lipstick actively dries out the lips, but I also don't feel like it hydrates them. I think that my lips do end up feeling a bit dry over the course of the day when I'm wearing this lipstick, just as they would with any matte bullet lipstick, but I don't feel like it's drying out the lips, and I also don't feel like they look dry. Like after wearing this for a couple of hours, no one's looking at me and being like, wow, her lips are super dried out, they're raisins. It's not like that. I just don't think that it's like this unicorn of extreme hydration where it's like plumping and hydrating your lips and nourishing them, even though it looks really matte. I feel like you can't really have your cake and eat it too. In that way, you can't really have both worlds, but what you can do is to walk the very, very fine line between them. And I feel like that is what Lisa Eldridge has done successfully and to great effect with this formula. So before I jump into my final thoughts, because I have had this for a couple of days now, I've been wearing it around, this is like maybe the third or fourth day in a row that I've worn it. Before I jump into kind of like telling you what I think about this purchase for myself, let's look at the beautiful overhead footage. So the first thing that I did when I opened this was to set up my camera in the overhead position and film a bunch of really clear close-up shots of the lipstick when it was untouched. So before I swatched it, I filmed it for you. I filmed the outer packaging. It's all very beautiful, really classy. It's not affected. It's really classy and clean and sleek. I feel like that way about the box that it comes in, the outer packaging. And I also feel that way about the bullet itself, the inner packaging. You know, it has all of these things that make it really luxurious feeling and lovely to use, but it's not overdone at all. It's not overworked in any way. Like the font, the styling, the color, the shape, none of it is overwrought. It's just, you know, elegant and simple and delivering the beautiful makeup. It really suits, I think, Lisa Eldridge's just overall aesthetic and the overall way that she runs her channel. It really fits with her brand. The color is incredible. Looking at the bullet before I had swatched it or anything, I was really excited because it definitely has, you know, it has that murkiness, like it has something a little bit singed, a little bit tinged about it, but it doesn't dull it down at all. It's still really, really like a bright, how can I say this? I feel like it's both murky and dirty and pure and strong. I feel like the murkiness hasn't made it grungy at all. And I love a grungy thing. So I'm not saying that if it had been made grungy that would be a problem, but it is a true red. It has stayed a true red as they've balanced the color. And yet the way in which those muted tones, those burnt, rusty, and yellow tones have been dialed up in this color lends it a unique quality that also feels really creamy and yummy to me. So when I was looking at the color, looking at the bullet, I just wanted to dive into it. I just wanted to like paint all my walls in it and buy a bunch of bedding in this color. Like there's something really gut level satisfying about the way that the tones are balanced for me in this particular red. The first thing I did was to grab the two lipsticks in my collection that I had offhandedly been kind of the most concerned that it would dupe. So I didn't want it to be too similar to Tom Ford Wild Ginger because this has been my like creme de la creme, best of the best lipstick, designer lipstick for a long time. And I was kind of thinking that this might come in and take its place. Not that I'm ready to part with Wild Ginger yet. It's just that I haven't been wearing it as much in recent years, partly because it is so slippery and emollient, and I knew that this one wouldn't be. I was thinking that this would be kind of like an updated version of this. Not exactly the same color though. So I wouldn't have been happy, I think, if they had been exact dupes for each other, because even though it would have been different in terms of like the formula and the finish, I feel like I wanted to update my best red, not just in formula, but also in color. So I was hoping that it would be rustier, more muted, more cinnabar-y than Wild Ginger. And indeed, it very much is. Like Wild Ginger looks like this sort of watery, bright red next to this. And it looks really, really semi-sheer next to this because the pigment of this is just so rich and intense. The other lipstick that I wanted to swatch next to this one from Lisa Eldridge is really new to my collection. It's the Slim Glow Matte Lipstick from YSL. This was sent to me in PR. It doesn't have the shade name on here, but it's touted as like a brick nude, almost like an orange nude or like a burnt orange. So this promised to be really quite orange nude red. And I was a little bit worried that because this also has those yellow undertones, that they would be rather similar. The YSL lipstick is also supposed to be matte. However, it's way, way less matte than the one from Lisa Eldridge. Already, without having compared them, I had talked in a video about the fact that this is way less matte than I thought it was going to be, given that it's called the Slim Glow Matte Lipstick. It's just not a matte lipstick. I don't know why they're calling it that. But when I put it next to this truly matte Lisa Eldridge Velvet, this like rich velvety matte, it really belies the claim of this, that it's a matte lipstick. So neither Tom Ford Wild Ginger nor YSL 214 look matte next to this, and neither one of them is anywhere near the color of Velvet Dragon. I'll show you the swatches, the three of them swatched out together. They are three very, very different lipsticks. So that was great because those were my initial concerns. I was like, is it going to have anything in common with Wild Ginger or with that YSL lipstick? The answer turned out to be no. It is a creature unto itself. But then I was like, okay, I have to compare it to all of the reds in my collection. I think I was a little bit surprised at how very different it was from those two that I had been thinking of. And that made me wonder if there were other reds in my lip collection that are pretty similar to Velvet Dragon that I just hadn't been thinking of, if I hadn't really been conceiving of it correctly when I was awaiting its arrival. So I went over to my makeup collection and I grabbed all of my red lips. Not even just lipsticks, but red lips, all of the reds of every formula. And I brought them over and I swatched them all out on my arm. I'm not going to talk you through every single one of these reds as I roll the overhead swatch footage of them, but hopefully the footage is clear enough that you can see what I'm swatching as I'm doing it. And I also will link every single one of them in the description box below, and I'll link them in the order that I swatched them in the footage. So if there's one of these that really strikes your fancy and you want to know what it is, check the description box below because you'll be able to see what it is there. The only ones that I'm actually going to talk about in detail are the ones that turned out to really have something in common with Lisa Eldridge's Velvet Dragon color-wise. And those are, really curiously and surprisingly, those are M Cosmetics Moroccan Sunset, which was like the first one that I swatched, Glossier's Vanillic Lip in the shade Disco, and then strangely Goldie Red by Gucci, which is the last thing I swatched. And it has, I think, a little bit less in common in every way with Velvet Dragon than these other two. These other two have quite a lot in common. Disco from Glossier and Moroccan Sunset by M Cosmetics. Color-wise, they have quite a lot in common with Velvet Dragon. Goldie Red doesn't have quite as much because it's so sheer, and so it really lights up the lips. It really has this kind of lightness to it, but it is a little bit of a dirty red. That's something that I'm learning as I compare it to more and more things, as like reds come in and I swatch it next to them. So it's not as different than I was maybe thinking. If you had asked me, like, are these two super different reds or do they kind of have something in common? I would have thought that they were two super different reds, but it's not as different as I initially thought. So I decided to include it in the more detailed comparison of my red lipsticks that have anything at all in common with Velvet Dragon. So after I had laid out all of the swatches on my arm and I had swiped a long, juicy swatch of Velvet Dragon down my arm, I was able to see, first of all, that red lipstick is infinitely various and so beautiful. I mean, this is just such a fun thing to do. But I was also able to see that there is something about the vibrance of this velvet lipstick formula that makes it stand apart. I just feel like that's a streak of velvet on my arm. It is really, really different. Even though lots of my red lipsticks are super beautiful, it definitely stood out in a way. And I could see at a glance that the 3 lipsticks that I pulled to examine more closely, the 3 that have a little bit of something in common color-wise, are all 3 very, very different formula-wise. In the finish, in the formula. And in this case, especially in the case of a red like this, that really does affect the color. So just after swatching, just those initial swatches, I immediately satisfied myself that this isn't a dupe for anything in my collection. But I decided to do some close-up swatches of the 4 of them. And I'll tell you, I was not disappointed in the slightest to find out that Velvet Dragon is relatively close in color to Moroccan Sunset and to Glossier's Disco. And that is because these are like my favorite red color to wear. But because the formulas are so slippy and shiny, I don't tend to reach for them as often because it makes me a little bit nervous. I really especially love Moroccan Sunset. It's like, since it came into my collection, I've wanted to wear it all the time because I really, really love this soft, burnt, yellowy red, this cinnabar red. But when I've worn it, it's a great formula, but it's kind of slippy and you can't really overline in the same way. It doesn't really set down. I tend to reach for the vanillic lip more because it is more sheer and so it's easier to wear. But both of them are emollient, kind of more casual formulas. And because they've got a little bit of sheerness, the color, it's beautiful, it's really lovely, but it doesn't have that like punch you in the face statement. Even though it feels that way because I feel that way about this color, I feel that way about this cinnabar color. So I look at it in the tube, or I look at it in the little bullet and I'm like, it's that red that I really, really love. But then when I put it on, it's a little bit more muted than that. It doesn't have the power that this one from Lisa Eldridge has. So if you had told me before I purchased this that what I was going to be getting was a velvet lipstick formula version of Moroccan Sunset or of Glossier Disco, I would have been like, bring it on. I would have been even more excited about buying it. So I'm glad that that's what it turned out to be. For a red to have like a rustiness, to have that burnt tone, but to still be bright and light enough that it doesn't look like a vampy color, like it doesn't look like a maroon on me. That's pretty special. And I feel like this color, the way that the color is balanced, it's a little bit less inclined to turn that vampy direction than either of these 2 glossy formula products. Another final thought that I have is that I'm glad that I waited. Even though I have known since Lisa Eldridge started making lipsticks that I would like a red in this formula, I'm glad that I didn't buy one of the other reds. I'm glad I didn't buy Velvet Jazz or Velvet Morning or Velvet Ribbon just to have a beautiful velvet red, because I feel like this velvet formula was really made for reds. Like reds are really its pinnacle. Reds are where this formula really shines, like really, really lives its best life. The nudes are beautiful as well. So I'm not saying that like those nudes aren't great or that the formula doesn't serve them. Of course, it's perfectly fine. I just feel like this formula and red, they're the match made in heaven. Like I feel like she kind of designed it for red. So I wanted a red. But none of them were my perfect red. And I'm really glad that I didn't give in to the temptation to buy one, because then when this came out, I would have been like, oh, there it is. She finally made it. But I already have this red from last year and I've only, I've only like used a 5th of it or something. And I wouldn't have been able to bring myself to buy this one. This just arrived. And so I'm going to just open it and explore the products with you. These are some products from Lisa Eldridge's most recent launch. I wasn't able to get one of the blushes when I finally realized that the products had gone live. They were all sold out, but I got the liquid highlighter and I have a bunch of liquid highlighters with which to compare it. And I have one of the Lucent lip colors and one of the lip glosses. So you and I together are just going to play. As soon as I zipped this open, when I opened the package, which was yesterday, I just couldn't wait. Okay. I just remembered one of my dreams. It's so close to when I woke up that I'm like just remembering my dreams. Sometimes I dream that I'm a drag queen. It's so profound. And I had one of those dreams last night. What was I even talking about? These products arrived yesterday and I haven't swatched the lip product yet because I wanted to be able to show it to you untouched, the bullet, I mean, but I briefly tried on the gloss and I actually wore the highlighter yesterday. So it's not exactly quite a first impressions. It's just this is me documenting my first serious playtime with these 3 products. Anyway, when I first opened this yesterday and I unzipped this zipper, I was just like, quality. I mean, zippers, there are good zippers. It's like there are zippers and then there are zippers. Some zippers are totally garbage. On a little makeup bag like this, especially when it comes complimentary with a purchase, it tends to be a garbagey zipper. And this is a very, very good zipper. Here are the products in their boxes. Here are the products outside of their boxes. The Elevated Glow highlighter is in the shade Crystal Nebula. The lip gloss is in the shade Go Lightly. It's the Gloss Embrace. And the lipstick, the Luxuriously Lucent lip color, is in the shade Kitten Mischief. But I'm going to explore the highlighter first. It's a new launch. The other 2 products, they're just new colors of things that have been on the market for a while already. This is a new formula to the market, and I feel like it's the one to which I can speak the most because I have like a strong interest in this kind of product, like a versatile liquid highlighter, like a highlighting fluid. And I have a number of highlighting fluids that I use on a regular basis. I basically use them instead of primers these days. So I'm going to be comparing Crystal Nebula to these similar formulas, one from Charlotte Tilbury, one from Auric, one from Chanel, and one from Say Beauty. But first, I'm gonna put it all over my face. I'm just gonna apply it the way that I apply this kind of product, and then I'm gonna apply a little bit of makeup on top of it. I'm just ready to get some makeup onto my face. And this is how I use, usually the Chanel one and the Auric one. Those are my 2 favorites these days. I use them all over my face, and that's how I wore this product yesterday. The thing that surprised me the most about it, 2 things actually surprised me about it when I opened it and swatched it for the first time. The first thing that surprised me is that it's kind of dark in color. It's definitely like a tan, but it's kind of saved by the second thing that surprised me, which is that it's very liquidy. It's much more liquidy than the Charlotte Tilbury Hollywood Flawless Filter and the Auric Glow Lust, both of which are more like pastes. Glow Lust, when you pump it out, it holds its shape. And this, it's not quite liquidy enough to drip down your hand, but it's just thinner, more lightweight. It almost has a sense of like oiliness about it. It feels more like a serum than, frankly, I was expecting it to feel. And because of that, it blends out pretty sheer. And I find that it doesn't palpably darken the color of my face, which is what I was worried about when I saw the color the first time. So there it is, like in a thick application, like that's just a bunch of it on my cheeks. Now I'm just gonna blend it out, blend it in, blend it all over. Okay, there it is, literally all over my face, basically as a primer, which is how I plan to use it and how I use this kind of product. Does it look beautiful? Yes. I mean, it is an elegant formula, and I like the serum-y quality. It does feel sort of smoothing, and it does feel like it's not doing that thing where it sets such that it won't build, such that it pills, but it definitely did feel like it was putting like a smoothing layer on the surface of my skin. I know it's supposed to like tighten, it's supposed to have this like micro mesh quality. I'm not really into that as a claim. I just kind of feel like the shape of your face is the shape of your face, and like the idea that it's gonna like take years off your life and like, you know, give you plastic surgery or something is, I'm not into that as like a claim. But the quality of it, the way that it sits on the surface of the skin is very pleasing. And I don't know whether that's because of whatever is in it that is supposed to be this like slight tightening thing, or if it's just the fact that it's serum-y and smooth and really luxurious. So yes, it feels lovely to apply. It goes on beautifully. It's giving me that intense glow all over that I know that my concealers will layer beautifully on top of. But I think the real question here is like, does it look palpably different or palpably better than a face full of Charlotte Tilbury Hollywood Flawless Filter, a face covered in Auric Glow Lust, or a face covered in Chanel Les Beige? No, it doesn't. Because when you have a liquid highlighter, like a sheer liquid highlighter that really lights up your skin and provides a super glossy base for you to layer other things on top of, when you have one that works even reasonably well, like when you have one that works, it's like you've got one that works and you don't need also another one that works and another one that also works. I definitely don't need 4 that work. I only have them because I review this kind of thing quite frequently on YouTube. But if I had, for example, just the Auric Glow Lust and I used it like this, or if you have the Auric Glow Lust and you use it like this every day, do I think that there's such a huge difference here that you should add it to your collection, which already contains a thing like this that works well? No. However, if you're looking for something like this and you've considered the one from Auric and you've considered the one from Charlotte Tilbury and you've considered the one from Chanel and now you're considering this one and you want to know if it performs at the level of those because maybe you're leaning towards picking it instead of any of those, does it perform at the level? Yes, it absolutely does, at least as well as the best of those. It's just perfect. I'm going to go ahead and do what I do, which is to put like a mixture of green color corrector and concealer and BB cream in a thin layer on my face, maybe a tiny bit of spot concealing. And I think I'll probably throw on some mascara and then we can proceed with the video. After I come back with more makeup on, I'll actually do swatch comparisons between this highlighting product from Lisa Eldridge and the other ones that I've been talking about. Okay, during the process of applying that mixture of base product to my face, I feel like I've fallen more for Crystal Nebula. What's it called? Elevated Glow. I feel like I've fallen for it more in applying stuff on top of it and feeling it has this like seamless feeling. It really, really does. This part of my skin, which doesn't really have any other product on it, like I haven't really applied concealer there, I feel like it does have a particularly blurred and yet super smooth quality to it. Like it does look really good. So I'm trying not to get like sucked in by the hype of the claims. You know what I mean? Like this, I feel like when you get a new makeup product and it is performing well and the claims are really magical, it's tempting to super buy into it and be like, it tightens and lifts the skin. It makes me look incredible. Like to sort of get this like delusional sense around it. Because I'm trying to review it, I'm trying not to do that. I'm trying to, be realistic. So what I will say realistically and very accurately is that it's a pleasure to apply other makeup on top of it. It feels like it blends really well. And the glow is still coming through, but it's not like competing with or detracting from the work of the concealer and the color corrector. I'm very pleased with this base right now. I'm just very pleased. Maybe I'll powder just the tiniest bit on my cheeks to make sure that that stuff is set. And then I'm going to put the mascara on. The glow is actually looking so intense that I'm tempted to tone it down a tiny bit, like on either side of my nose, just in my under eye area. Yeah, it's still glowy, but it's softer. Yeah, that's basically going to be it for me for complexion today. Gosh, I'm really feeling myself, but you can tell that I'm like a little bit jumbled about this because I still endorse what I said, which is like, if you already have Flawless Filter, just stick with it. If you already have Auric Glow Lust or the Chanel product, just stick with it. Like it's getting you basically the same effect as what this is going to get you. And it does basically the same thing as what this does. I think that what I will say is that if you don't have any of them and you're thinking of buying one, I would say consider either the Lisa Eldridge or the Auric Glow Lust. Auric Glow Lust is really, really special and it provides more coverage. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit more of like a hybrid coverage product, more like a cross between concealing, priming, and illuminating, then definitely Auric. If you're looking for something that's really going to completely sheer out and just provide that like sheer seamless layer. Right now, and again, this is somewhat of a first impressions, this feels like the best I've ever tried. It's so good. I do like it better than the Chanel, except for that the color's a little dark, which brings me to the swatches. Let's do the swatches. So all the way on the end here underneath my pinky, that's Crystal Nebula from Lisa Eldridge. And then next to it, the next one in is the Charlotte Tilbury Hollywood Flawless Filter. It's in the lightest shade. It's a little bit more yellow. It's much lighter, and the product, the quality of it is much thicker. The third one there is Auric Glow Lust in the shade Morganite. It's also much thicker, more like a paste, just like Charlotte Tilbury Hollywood Flawless Filter. It's also lighter than Crystal Nebula. They all are. I mean, look how orange Crystal Nebula looks compared to all of these. But Morganite is definitely the pinkest. And then the second to the last, this one right here, that's the Chanel. It's really liquidy and really sheer. And the last one is the Say Beauty Illuminator. It's like a gel. Even though it looks pretty luminous here, it blends away to almost nothing. And the thing that makes it really different though is that it's a gel. It's like really squidgy. So I put a dot of each one across the top and then a more sheared out line of each one. And there's a little bit of a different angle. So Crystal Nebula is at the bottom. I'm just gagged by how much darker and more orange it is than these other ones. It's a bit difficult to capture illuminators on camera, but let's do some full hand swatches. So I'm gonna put Crystal Nebula all over the back of this hand. And yeah, once it shears out, the color does become imperceptible. And the serum-y quality, it's like it's got the lightweight. The thing that I like about it is that it's lightweight. And the only reason that I keep this Say Beauty product around, because I really don't like it very much, is that it's very, very lightweight and sort of watery and skincare-y feeling. And this has that quality too. It has that really lightweight quality, but the glow is much beefier than the glow of Say. Let's compare it first to the Charlotte Tilbury. I'm gonna put that all over my other hand. It's so much thicker. The Charlotte Tilbury product is physically much thicker, and it feels like it doesn't blend into the skin quite as elegantly because of that. However, when they're blended out, they are visually pretty much identical. This hand has a LISA ELDRIDGE and this hand has a Charlotte Tilbury. Let's put the Chanel on the other hand. It's really liquidy. It's the most liquidy of all of them. And so it blends out looking much more wet to begin with because there's so much that's actually wet in it. It's much more like a liquid though than a serum. The LISA ELDRIDGE one is like not this wet liquid. It almost feels like it has oils in it just because of the property of the serum. It doesn't feel oily, but it feels like it might have oils giving it the viscous quality that it has. The Chanel Illuminator I really love because it's got that very pale color. It's the best match for my skin. And I like that it's thin. Sometimes the Auric one's my favorite, but sometimes I don't feel like wearing something so thick, something that has that coverage. I always reach for the Chanel and put it all over my face on those days, but it's heavily scented. It's heavily scented. It's like the one thing about it that's a huge drawback for me. I always just worry a little bit when I put it on because it's so scented. The Auric Glow Lust, I'm putting that all over my hand. And yeah, it's so much thicker. Again, it's just like the Hollywood Flawless Filter. It's more like a paste. And it's much pinker. I feel like in this case, you can kind of see a little bit that it's like got a pinker color and a little bit more of that sort of like satin quality, the really blurring satin quality. That's on this hand, the Auric Glow Lust. Yeah, I'm willing to say that Auric, with its satiny quality, is barely perceptibly, perhaps a bit more pore filling, like a bit more texture blurring, in addition to having a little bit more coverage. Really splitting hairs here. It's a little bit different in that way, but the major difference among any of these, the major difference is going to be the tactile quality of the formula, the way it applies, blends, and sets. So the two really beefy ones are Auric Glow Lust and Hollywood Flawless Filter. The most liquidy one is Chanel. The one that's like a nasty gel is from Say. And the LISA ELDRIDGE is like this serum-y, elegant fluid. Let's play with the lip products. You might have seen me cringe a little bit when I mentioned that I tried the gloss on yesterday. That's because it's way pinker than I expected it to be. It's in the shade Go Lightly. I'm really allured by the idea that it's like a derivative of an Audrey Hepburn lipstick. I like the idea of a gloss that really lights up the lips. I've been leaning into gloss lately. I have been more okay with pink toned things lately, but I was hoping that this would be a subtler or a more sheer pink than it appeared to me when I applied it just really quickly last night, kind of half in the dark. So I haven't really gotten the full picture yet, but it's a much brighter coral than I thought it was going to be. Okay, it was a much brighter coral than I expected it to be. The formula is more pigmented than I expected it to be, but applying it just now with a little bit more care, shearing it out a little more, overlining a little bit, it looks much more natural, more wearable than I was worried that it was going to be when I put it on last night. And I was like, this bright pink lip, I can't with that. I look like a bubblegum Barbie. I actually think this looks beautiful, looks fine. I'm probably going to end up wearing it. I mean, it looks relatively natural, doesn't it? Like it looks relatively natural on me. Okay, let me talk to you about the formula. Thin, totally non-sticky, but very nourishing feeling. Yeah, I approve. I kind of wish that I had tried the other one first because I would be happy continuing wearing this for the rest of my day. Like I feel like that, especially just with the natural skin, mascara, and then this lip. Based on the first application, I was worried that the bright pink would like be too much, even in a light application like this, that it would feel like it was overwhelming such a simple complexion and eye look. But in fact, it's not. I'm relieved. I was worried I had made a really bad decision in picking this color for review. All right, let's try the Luxuriously Lucent lip color in Kitten Mischief, which also isn't like the grungy taupey brown that you would think that I would pick. You know what I mean? It's a little bit more of a normal color than the kinds of things I go for. I think that when I placed this order, I was just kind of feeling like pushing out of my box a little bit. Okay, I really like this formula. I was worried that it would be softer, like kind of more squashy and slidey and glassy and sort of slip around and be hard to control, but it's not. The bullet is pretty firm, and I feel like it really is like an enhancement of my natural lips. It's really pretty sheer. I'll swatch the lip gloss too in a second. I realize that I haven't been swatching them. You're seeing basically my natural lip color through sort of a haze of this color, and it does feel really nourishing. I was worried that it was going to be kind of like more chapsticky, more like the Bobbi Brown crushed lip color, or more super slidey and crushy, kind of like the Gucci one. But in fact, it's a very sturdy formula in terms of the way that it applies. It's like it's understated, and I like that. Color-wise, also very wearable, leaning a little more pink on me maybe than I was hoping for. Like I would have liked it to be more on the mauve side, like have a little more gray in it, a little bit more grunge. Eminently wearable. Like it's going to be really easy to throw on. I have a feeling I'm going to be finishing a lot of looks with this, like strong blush looks or strong eye looks when I want something on my lips, but I don't want it to compete with them. This is going to be something that I reach for. I predict that I'll wear this more than I wear the velvets, because those mattes, that is a strong look. It's a little bit more of a statement, even though I really love the two colors that I have. And I actually do wear velvet fawn quite a lot. Even so, I imagine that I'll wear this even more. So yeah, Kitten Mischief, it does look a little bit deeper and a little bit less brightly pink, but I think that I kind of liked, for right now, for today, I kind of liked the gloss better. The thing that I've tried recently that I feel like is a good comp for this, the Luxuriously Lucent, is Glossier Ultra Lip. Just in that they're sort of selling the same idea, you know what I mean? Like a hybrid product that's easy to wear, that kind of lights up the lips and is nourishing and comfortable. I like Ultra Lip, and I've been wearing the ones that I reviewed quite a bit. The one thing, sort of the only thing that gives me pause is that it's easy to get really sloppy with them because they're so glossy and slidey and squishy. And this, what I was saying about the elegance of the application, kind of the hardness of the bullet, in its physical quality, it combats all of those issues. I feel like this is definitely like a more refined version of something like the Glossier Ultra Lip. But since I have them here, I'm going to compare the color of this to the color of Villa, which is the Glossier Ultra Lip that's the most like it. Oh my goodness, I'm so glad I decided to do this. They're pretty much color dupes. It looks to me like Kitten Mischief has a little bit more yellow in it. The color is just that much more carefully balanced, that much more sophisticated. Kitten Mischief is on top. It's the one that's closest to my thumb. So you can see that the Ultra Lip here is way glossier. I mean, not way glossier, like they're both, you know, they both have some shine, but it's a really, really high shine product compared to Luxuriously Lucent. And you can see that the color tones, like the balance of undertones, are just a little bit flatter in the Ultra Lip in Villa. It's kind of like the Luxuriously Lucent lip color is like the Pharaoh and Ball paint version of this color, and the Glossier Ultra Lip is like the regular paint that you get at Home Depot version of this color. Which is to say that in practice, like they're both gonna work, they're both gonna give you what you're aiming for, they're both gonna fit with what you had on your vision board for your room, you know? But if you really want to pay a little more and do the most and go the extra mile to have that like sophisticated tone and layers of undertone, then you go for the fancy one. and also a finish actually in this case, because this like glossy satiny finish is also contributing, I think, to the fact that the color reads as something a little bit more special. But also they're the same color. Like they're dupes. Like I think the Glossy Ultra Lip in Villa is a really good dupe for Kitten Mischief. Listen up, you Lisa Eldridge stans. I am one of you. I love everything about Lisa. She is so elegant and intelligent. I feel like she approaches everything and everyone with grace. She definitely sets the standard for technique-based tutorials, for wearable looks that elevate one's natural beauty and work for regular people. Her appreciation, oh my gosh, her appreciation for the history of makeup and the way that she investigates and unpacks and explains that history and makes it accessible is a gift to the contemporary beauty community. I really feel like Lisa Eldridge is the antidote to everything that ails the world of beauty in the 2020s, and I shudder to think what the landscape of beauty would be without her. On top of which, Velvet Dragon is my all-time favorite red lipstick. I'm ready to confess that it has edged out Tom Ford Wild Ginger and is sitting on the throne. But a product only works for me if it works for me. I only love something if it's perfect for me, and I want to give as thorough a review as possible of this foundation, which, though it is extraordinary in many ways, isn't perfect for me, and I'm not sure that it is going to actually work out for me. So in this review, I'm going to take you through absolutely everything that I can think of. I'm going to give you as thorough a review as I'm capable of giving. I'm going to go over a long list of questions that I've set out for myself to answer. First, there's a set of questions that are just about my skin, because I think that a review like this, a review of a base product, has got to be in the context of the skin that I'm testing it on. So I'm going to answer the question, what is my skin color? Like, what exactly is my skin tone? What is my skin like? My skin type, texture, etc. And then what do I look for in a base product? Like, what do I want? Because I think sometimes even people with the same exact skin type or even the same skin type and skin tone could be looking for different things from each other in a product like this. I'll show you some really good close-up overhead footage of myself unboxing this. I'll show you its beautiful box. I'll show you the packaging really, really close up. And I'll answer the question, what is the packaging like in real life? The box, the bottle shape, the pump style, etc. Then we'll start swatching, and I'll answer the question, what is the color like in real life? I have the lightest shade. It's shade 1. It's the only one described as extra light. It's described as extra light and neutral. So I'll swatch it and I'll compare it to all of the other base products I have. The next question I'll answer is, what is the formula like? How does it feel? How pigmented is it? How does it apply? And for that section, I'll be showing you the application footage that I took when I applied this look today. So I applied it in layers with my hands and with a brush. I'll give you good close-up footage of that and close-up footage of the way that it looked at every stage of application. Then I'll talk about wear, how it wears on the skin, how it wears throughout the day. I've been testing it now for several days, and I've tested it with a bunch of different primers and under a bunch of different conditions. And after that, I'll give you my final thoughts. So starting with the questions about my skin. Question number 1, what color is my skin? I have very, very pale, neutral to warm leaning skin. So neutral to yellow leaning, not peach. It doesn't lean peach or orange at all. It leans yellow and might even lean a teeny tiny bit olive, although it's difficult to tell because it's so pale. But I've had some people comment that, and I'm starting to think that there might be something to that. It's difficult for me to find a shade match. Most shade ranges don't actually go tonally light enough to match my neck. And among the shade ranges that do go tonally light enough to match me, it's very, very rare to find one that has a neutral or a neutral to yellow leaning lightest shade. A lot of those super light shades tend to be quite pink. If you happen to have quite light, quite neutral skin and you want a little bit of context, NARS Chantilly is a good spot concealer for me because it's a tiny bit darker than my skin and it's also quite yellow, but the color of NARS Chantilly is not as light as my skin. The very, very lightest shade in the Makeup Forever Ultra HD Concealer is too light for me. It's one of the only things that I've ever found that was really too light for me. It's too light and too pink. The second lightest shade, which is called Pearl, is a good brightening concealer on me. The shade Birch in the Hourglass Vanish Concealer is really, really great for me because it's super neutral. It's very pale and it's so neutral that it almost looks gray sometimes, especially when it's swatched next to other base products. That's kind of the ticket for me. And then the absolute best match that I've ever found in any base product is the Rose Ink Concealer in the lightest shade LX010. This is a recent find and it's been really exciting to be able to just put one product on my face and have it match my neck. Prior to discovering this product, I was almost always using green color corrector to make whatever base product that I used more green so that it would match my undertone better. Green color corrector is a great tool for me because I deal with redness, so it helps to cancel out that redness. But I also find that mixing green color corrector in with most of the lightest shades of things that are on the market takes that shade closer to the actual color of my skin, which is one of the other things that makes me think that there might be a drop of olive in my complexion. Or it could just be the yellow. It could just be like that pale neutral to yellow that the green helps match. Let's talk about skin type. So what is my skin like? I'm 36 years old and I'm definitely starting to develop some fine lines on my forehead and around my mouth and, underneath my eyes. I don't have any fillers or Botox or anything. I've never had any kind of cosmetic procedure done. I mean, you can tell that I don't have Botox, right? This is how you can tell. My skin is dry. I do moisturize pretty heavily and I sleep in a pretty thick layer of moisturizer at night. So it doesn't always look or feel dry, but if I don't take care of it, it leans dry. My skin is also acne prone, but my acne is currently being kept at bay by the tretinoin that's in my Curology formula. Tretinoin, though, is also very drying. So I have dry leaning skin already, and then I'm using this very drying topical for my acne. At this point, I've been using the tretinoin for 9 or 10 months, so my skin is fully adjusted. It's pretty balanced right now, but it isn't at its absolute peak of balance and hydration because of the weather and because I used an acid mask on it a couple of months ago and it's taken me a really, really long time to reestablish balance. But for the most part, my skin is in pretty normal shape right now. And those are the underlying conditions. I also deal with redness, as you'll see in the application footage. When you see my bare skin, you'll see that my face is much, much redder than my neck. And so I'm always looking for base products to make my face match my neck. Which brings me to my next question. What do I personally look for in a base product, a product like this? So I love a skin-like finish on the face. I really love skin to look like skin. I don't like looking like I'm wearing makeup all over my face. So I'm always on the hunt for an extremely natural, extremely skin-like finish. I'm always looking for a base product that you just cannot even see on the skin, like something that's completely undetectable as makeup. Even when I'm wearing a full face of makeup like I'm pretty much doing today, I still like the skin to look very natural. And then I like the makeup to be like what's on my eyes, lips, and cheeks. However, because my skin is so darkened by redness, it's kind of a tall order because I'm usually looking to cover all of that redness and lighten it, bring it up to the color of my neck. So I'm looking for something that can provide coverage to that redness, but still look like skin. Like everyone, I'm always looking for a good match, a good color match. I'm always trying to match my neck, which again has this very pale and kind of yellow cast to it. I know that lots of people don't feel like their skin needs to exactly match their neck, but that's the look that I like. So that's what I aspire to. I'm trying to make my face this color, which is the color that it would naturally be if it weren't darkened by the redness that I get around my jawline and my chin. I'm also looking for ease of use, and this is kind of a big thing for me. I require my base products, all of my makeup really, but especially my base products, to be unfussy. It doesn't need to be bulletproof. It doesn't need to be like the most permanent makeup ever, like something that you'd wear to shoot a movie or for sports or something like that. But I just don't want to be worrying throughout the day. I don't want it to feel delicate because I like my makeup to feel lived in, to look lived in. And in order to comfortably live in it, I need it to be hardy. I don't like feeling like a delicate flower. I was a tango dancer and teacher for 10 years. And during that time, I was very active and pressing my face up against other people's faces when I was dancing. And in my current life, even though I'm mostly inside of the house, I'm also very active. I'm cooking over a hot stove. I'm running around, moving equipment for filming, putting things away, getting things out, changing clothes multiple times a day for filming. And so I need cosmetics that can come with me through my busy day. I hope that that gives you a complete sense of what I'm looking for in a product like this. Now let's move on to the unboxing and a peek at the overhead footage. The outer packaging of the product, the box, is absolutely impeccable. I feel like it manages to be both innovative and futuristic feeling and also classic. It reminds me of packaging for like a high-end perfume or something. The top of the box lifts off and the bottle is standing inside of it like a little spaceship. I love this. This tickles and delights me. And it also reads as extremely luxurious, especially because there's like a velvety type material lining the inside, like a piece of jewelry or again, a fine perfume or something. The most unusual thing about this foundation though, is that it doesn't stand up on one's vanity in the way that it stands up in its little box. And I couldn't tell this by looking at the pictures or by looking at the release video or anything. The way that it sits is, I was worried it was going to roll around, right? It has a flat edge, so it sits like this on your vanity or on your table. I'm looking around for a surface to put it on. This is the only thing that I can find that's like within reach to hold up. This is an old magnetic palette of mine that's all taped up with duct tape. But you can see that's how it sits. So it definitely is stable when you put it down. It doesn't roll around. And even when the cap is off, it's angled so that the pump isn't touching the table. It has been pretty awkward getting used to this. When I'm holding it and I pump a pump out and then I go to put it down, I always feel like I'm just lying a bottle on its side. And it's a weird feeling because I'm not used to doing that with foundation. I feel like it's going to roll away, or I feel like the pump is going to touch the table. And then I remember, oh, it has this flat side. And then I have to kind of like move it around in my hand and find the flat side and put it down on the flat side. So it's actually, it's very striking and exciting. And it is so fun when something innovative that actually works is done in beauty. And it does work, you know what I mean? It's not clunky in and of itself, but I have found that it's taken a little bit of getting used to, and I have found it a little bit annoying. I think I can go ahead and say a little bit inconvenient that I can't just put it down on its butt like a normal bottle of foundation. And it's also like a storage thing. Like I have about 5 or 6 things that I like to use on my face a lot, mostly illuminators, lined up on my vanity right in front of the mirror. And I can't really put this with them. I can't really put it in the line with them. I have to like lie it down in front of them. So I actually am probably going to keep this little box. I'm probably going to keep the little box base sitting on my vanity in that lineup so that I can just put this in it to store it. I wouldn't go so far as to say that I wish the packaging wasn't like this, because it's not like that. If I were just a regular consumer and I hadn't been taking notes to make this YouTube review, I probably wouldn't even be thinking twice about it. I would probably just think it's beautiful. It's a work of art and I love it. But I've been paying very close attention to every single part of the experience. And I have to say that in practice, there are some things that have just grated ever so slightly about the bottle design. The pump is very beautiful, very luxurious, works effortlessly. And one of the things I love about this, it just pumps out a little bit at a time. And I watched LISA ELDRIDGE's launch video about this, and she talked about designing it so that it only pumps out a little bit at a time so you can go in layers building. She said she thinks that we tend to often go overboard, put on too much all at once when it comes to base products. And I totally agree with that. I think it's always better to start slow with a base product and build, especially if you're after that natural skin look that I am always after. And I think that LISA is pretty much always after. So that's just brilliant. The pump works flawlessly. It feels very satisfying to pump. And this is a small thing, but I only had to pump it 2 or 3 times after it first arrived to get that first bit out. It felt like the pump was already almost completely primed. I didn't have to sit there and pump it 30 or 40 times to get the product out. So all of those aspects of the packaging felt very luxurious and perfectly designed to me as well. Next question. This is one of the big ones. What is the color like in real life? It's one of the big ones for me. But again, if you have no interest in this color of this foundation, feel free to skip ahead. I got the lightest shade after some deliberation. I would have gotten those blister packs and done a test and found my perfect foundation shade if I had known in time that that was happening, but I didn't. I didn't place any orders for her new launches and new releases, and so I didn't receive any of those blister packs, and I didn't find out in time to get one before they sold out, to get one in advance of the launch, or to get 2, I think, which is what I would have had to do in advance of the launch so that I could be sure that I was ordering my perfect shade. I did, however, do a deep dive. I watched as many reviews as I could of people who had the blister packs and were like swatching them. And I looked up all of these blog posts. I feel like I consumed every scrap of review information that was available on the internet about the lightest shades in this foundation range before the launch day, because I wanted to buy it and so that I could review it as soon as possible after it launched. The shade range is in these groups of 4. And I think that it's grouped that way because of the sample packs, which have 4 in each. The lightest one has the extra light neutral shade, which is the one I got. And then it has 3 shades, which are, I think one is much yellower, one is much pinker, and one is more peach. And then in the next group down, 5, 6, 7, and 8, the lightest shade, shade 5, is neutral. So there's the extra light neutral shade, and then shade 5 is like 1 shade darker, but it's 5 down the row because it's the next neutral shade. And I did read online that shade 5 is supposed to only be 1 shade darker than shade 1. So it's supposedly just as light as the other 3 shades in the first group, 2, 3, and 4. It's just as light as them tonally, but it's neutral. I was torn between ordering shade 1 and shade 5. I was thinking shade 1 might actually be too light for me because it has been known to happen, again, like in the Makeup Forever concealer range, for example. And actually, the lightest shade in the Sephora Best Skin Ever foundation is not only too pink for me, but also much lighter than my perfect match, the Rose Ink. So I thought that there was a chance that shade 5 would actually be the best match for me. I also thought there was a chance that shade 3 might be the best match for me. That's the one that's light with golden undertones. So apparently the lightest one that leans yellow, as opposed to being neutral. But some of the swatches that I saw online and some of the application footage of people using the blister packs led me to believe that those light shades, as opposed to the one extra light, might be just a touch darker than what I prefer. And that was what caused me to go with extra light. Although I was a little bit worried that it would be more pink than neutral, especially compared to my other products. And as you'll see when I start swatching it out, that did prove to be the case. I wanted you to be able to see the way that this shade looks compared to every single one of my other products. So we put a long swatch of it down my arm. That also gave the product time to dry. I wanted you to see everything dry on my arm. So putting that long swatch down my arm allowed me to line up every single product right next to it. And as I was swatching through, it dried down so you could see the actual color, the way that it will look on one's skin. At the top, I swatched my 3 best matches, my 3 best base products. So the Rose Ink Concealer, the Hourglass Concealer, and the Makeup Forever Ultra HD Concealer. And I will put all of these products in the description box down below with their shades, the exact shades that I have, so that I don't have to keep repeating it over and over again. And of course, so that you can find these products if you're curious about them. Off the bat, you can see that the Lisa Eldridge foundation is pinker than any of these 3 concealers. And it's also just a touch lighter. Just a little bit lighter. All 4 of them look like they're pretty good tonal matches for my skin, like light enough for my skin. But all 3 of these concealers are a little bit more yellow, or I would actually say a little bit more neutral. And I say that because these three concealers, which look so good on my skin, they don't look yellow when they're compared to the Lisa Eldridge foundation. They look gray. They look like they have a drop of gray or even a drop of green in them compared to Lisa Eldridge 1, which looks very peach next to them. Of the four, the Makeup Forever concealer is the lightest, and then the Lisa Eldridge is the second lightest, but it's significantly more peach than my Makeup Forever concealer, which just looks much more neutral next to it. Then the concealers from Rose Inc and Hourglass, they just look really kind of gray and neutral compared to the other two. I'd say the one thing that disappointed me the most about the color of this product is that it feels so brightly peach rather than having that true neutrality. And it makes me wonder if shade 5 would actually be a better match for me or not. Because if this is what the Lisa Eldridge shade range considers to be the baseline, considers to be neutral, then shade 5 is probably also too peach for me. And if it's much darker than this, then it's going to be both too dark and too peach, which is something that I really don't like in a base product. And it also makes me wonder about shade 3, the light with golden undertones. Because if you're starting from a base of peachy neutrality, and then you add golden to that, like add yellow tone to that, make it more golden, then that's also going to be too strong of a color for, again, my very, very neutral skin. I'm really curious about the other shades though in this range. I love the range and I love the way that it's described, the way it's broken down. I wish that neutral was more neutral. I wish that neutral meant actually neutral, but it might make more sense if it's in context with actually seeing the other shades in person. So I'm definitely going to try to get my hands on some of those blister packs at some point. They've been all sold out for the entire time that I've been aware of this foundation. I then went on, of course, to swatch all of the rest of my base products next to the long swatch of Lisa Eldridge foundation. And I can't quite remember the order in which I swatched them, but I'll link them in the description box down below in the order in which I swatched them. So if you can't quite see what something is, even though I tried to give you close-ups of all of the names of all of the products, if you need a key for reference for a shade or a product name or a product link, that will be in the description box down below. Overall, the Lisa Eldridge foundation is a better match for my skin than most of my other base products, my foundation products. The concealers, which have gotten really, really close to my skin tone, are a better match than the Lisa Eldridge, but it's better than most of the other ones. The only thing of note that I discovered when I was swatching the rest of them is that the Morphe 2 Hint Hint Skin Tint in the lightest shade, which is called Hint of Ivory, is pretty much an exact color match for Lisa Eldridge Seamless Skin Foundation in shade 1. It's the closest match for sure of anything else in my collection, and it's a very, very close match. They look like almost the exact same thing. So at the end of this swatch party, I swatched Lisa Eldridge all over the back of one hand and Morphe 2 Hint Hint Skin Tint and Hint of Ivory all over the back of the other hand so that you could see how close they are, comparing those two huge swatches from one hand to the other. Hopefully this will be a helpful frame of reference for some of you out there who have something close to my skin tone and you have my same skin matching woes. And if you happen to have the Morphe 2 Hint Hint Skin Tint and Hint of Ivory, then you know exactly what color Lisa Eldridge 1 will be in person. Okay, the moment you've all been waiting for. Let's move on to talking about the formula. How does it feel in person? How does it apply? How pigmented is it? Etc., etc., etc. And as I move through the facets of this question, I'll roll footage of myself applying the foundation that I have on my face today. The formula is so beautiful. It's creamy, it's lightweight, it's incredibly thin, it disperses evenly and thinly, and it feels nourishing when it's going on. It is absolutely wonderful. In Lisa's video about this product, she talked about how innovative it was, that she designed it from the ground up, absolutely from scratch. And I believe that. I haven't tried like a ton of foundations. I don't wear a lot of foundation, so I haven't tried as many foundations as a lot of people have, but I've tried my share. And this definitely feels like nothing I've ever felt before. It doesn't feel like a serum. It doesn't feel whipped. It doesn't feel like a lotion. It doesn't feel
thick. It's also not drippy. When you pump it out, it has some body. When I hold up my hand, it doesn't drip down my hand. But then when I start applying it, it just becomes extremely, extremely thin. And when I say it becomes extremely thin, I don't mean sheer, although it kind of does that, and I'll address that in a second. I mean that it feels physically thin on the skin. It just spreads very thin, and it feels very lightweight. That's the term I guess we use. It's a joy to apply. It is so cosmetically elegant, and it looks beautiful when you start spreading it on the skin. I will go ahead and talk you through the application of this product today. I started by prepping my skin with another LISA ELDRIDGE product. I used the Seamless Skin Elevated Glow. I have it in the shade Crystal Nebula. It's a little bit dark for me, but I found that it's fine when I'm putting it under pretty much any of the base products that work for me. It doesn't cause a problem. I love how glowy it is, and I love how it preps my skin for product. I feel like it does give me a really smooth, hydrated looking and feeling surface. And that's important to me with this product because it is like a natural finish, but I don't know, I'd call it maybe more of a demi-matte. Like if I don't use something super glowy and hydrating and serum-y underneath it, it definitely leans matte really quickly on my dry skin. So I've had the best luck with this foundation using very glowy and very hydrating and emollient products underneath it. And this isn't exactly emollient, it dries down, but it's definitely dewy. And it definitely creates a really lovely surface for any base product to apply atop. I wanted to give the Elevated Glow Serum some time to work its magic, to kind of set into my face and prep my skin. So after I applied it, I did my brows. I put a little wax in my brows and shaped them. I gave it about 5 minutes to dry. I started with one pump of the foundation on one half of my face. I have found that putting one pump all over my entire face, it actually doesn't go very far. That is a very, very light look. And I could see that being great for some people, actually. I mean, that's like almost on the level of a very sheer tinted moisturizer, or even something like the Glossier Skin Tint. Not as sheer as the Glossier Skin Tint, but if you think of all these serum tints that have been on the market lately, I haven't tried all of them. Like I haven't tried the Ilia one, for example, but one pump of this all over the face, it gives me the kind of coverage that I've always imagined that Ilia tint would give me, because it is very skin-like. It feels very lovely. The finish is very beautiful, but it stretches, you know what I mean? You can blend it all over your entire face, and then it blends out so far that it's very, very lightweight and barely there. Visually, it's barely there. So having experimented with it and knowing that one pump can cover the entire face, but it barely shows up, I put the entire pump on the one half of my face. I rubbed that in with my hands because I figured that people who are wanting kind of a tinted moisturizer type of coverage from this product are likely going to apply it with their hands. And I do think that this is a really good application of this product for this kind of consumer, someone who just wants a barely there hint of skin tint, maybe someone who usually uses a tinted moisturizer but wants something just ever so slightly more makeup-y than that. I wouldn't hesitate to recommend this product to somebody who's looking for something like that, unless that person has quite dry skin, which we'll get to in a little bit. But that first application, using my hands on half my face, was designed to basically give you a sense of how this product can look when worn that way. But I almost always apply my base products with a brush. The brush is my tool of choice. I love a brush. I don't fuzz with a sponge. I don't mess with a sponge. And even though I do use my hands sometimes, I find myself reaching for a brush more frequently. So for the second layer on that same half of my face, I went in with a brush, and I did what I do with my concealers, with my other products of choice. I just went in and buffed it into my skin and tried to really push it in and make it one with my skin. And it applied pretty well. I feel like going in with a brush for the second layer with this product, it is a little bit prone to streakiness. It doesn't build quite as well as I thought that it might, and not quite as well as other more pigmented products that I've worked with before. I feel like when I was applying the second layer, the brush was picking up the first layer and mixing the two layers together, and then just reapplying the entire 2 pumps in one layer to my face. The end result was fine, but every time I've done it, it has just felt a little bit delicate. It has felt like I've had to pay close attention to make sure that there's no streak or patch left when I'm finished with the application. It's not difficult to make sure there aren't any streaks or patches. It's not like I'm fussing with it. I just have to pay very close attention. It's not exactly blending itself in the way that some base products do. I wanted you to see what 2 pumps look like on half of my face compared to a bare face, so you can really see the effect that the foundation has, and you can really see the color, right? Compared to the redness of my skin, the way that it is naturally, and compared to my neck with the context of the way that my skin would look if it didn't have anything on it. Then I went in and I got the other half of my face all caught up. I put 2 pumps on the other half of my face and blended them out with a brush. This foundation is supposed to be self-setting, and I wanted to give it today the best possible chance of really setting down so that I could demonstrate to you how it wears after it has purportedly set on your face. So I actually did my whole entire eye look. After I had applied 2 pumps to each side of my face, blended them out, gotten them perfect, seamless, and again, so beautiful. The finish on the skin is so lovely. It goes on so smoothly. It feels like a serum that's not drippy, like a serum quality, but it's got a little bit more body than a serum. Just exquisite. So after I had applied it, I went and I did my entire eye look. A couple of eyeshadows, a little bit of mascara. I would say the whole thing probably took 10 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, maybe 15 minutes. Definitely time enough for the setting, the self-setting to happen. And I did that. I gave it time to set before I went in with powder or blush or anything, because I wanted to demonstrate to you what might actually be for me the biggest drawback of this foundation in practice. And to demonstrate it, after I had done my whole eye look, and again, it had been like 10 or 15 minutes since I finished applying the foundation and I hadn't touched it, I gently pressed my finger onto my cheek and lifted it up. And you'll be able to see in the footage that it left a huge fingerprint behind on my face. That's not necessarily unheard of for a good makeup product. I mean, not every single makeup product has to be bulletproof enough to resist that kind of touch in order to be a good product, but it's not what I consider to be self-setting. When a product does that, when it lifts up like that just from a gentle touch, that makes me feel like I have to set it with powder. And that also indicates to me that if I go in with a cream product on top of it, like a cream blush, it's going to mix a little bit with the blush. It's not going to be something where I'm like just layering the blush on top of something that is completely set to my face. Because if a touch like that from my finger lifts it up, then a touch from a brush covered with cream blush is going to lift it up. And going in with my finger to apply cream blush is definitely going to pick it up. I don't particularly mind that when it comes to cream blush, because I feel like if blush is coloring my cheeks, it's okay that there's not a base product underneath it. I don't need to cover my skin and then add color to my skin. It's okay for the blush to basically be directly on my bare skin. So I don't mind when that happens. It's just worth noting. It reminds me a lot of the Fenty Ease Drop Blurring Skin Tint, which is another foundation product that I reviewed that behaved exactly like that. Beautiful finish, unless you have very dry skin, which again, we'll get to in a moment. Beautiful finish, but it did that. The Fenty Ease Drop did exactly that. It would set as far as it was going to set, and then a touch on my skin, a brush on my skin, or a touch with any other kind of makeup product or makeup brush would disturb it and reveal my bare skin underneath. Now, comparing this to something like the Rose Inc Concealer, my holy grail base product, and I kind of use concealers and foundations interchangeably, so that's why I'm comparing a foundation to a concealer. I know that for some people that might not make sense, it might not sit quite right. For me, I feel like blush, bronzer, and highlighter are kind of like all the same thing. It's just stuff you put on your cheeks. I feel like foundation and concealer are all the same thing. Some are very high coverage, some are very sheer coverage, and they're all base products. I'm using these things like paints rather than like things that fit into specific boxes. That's why it makes sense for me to say something like this. Comparing this product to my holy grail base product, the Rose Inc Concealer, it's not as though the Rose Inc Concealer is so bulletproof that it's never going to transfer at all. You know, if I were to put this on my cheek and then press my finger firmly and then lift it up, some product probably would come off on my finger. But this is extremely full coverage, so it wouldn't leave a spot behind on my face. Even if some product picked up, it wouldn't disturb the product on my face and you wouldn't be able to see. It wouldn't leave a fingerprint. It wouldn't lift up to reveal my bare skin. And the thing that the Lisa Eldridge foundation has in common with the Fenty Eavesdrop is this sheer buildable coverage situation. So I think that the reason that it's doing that, lifting up and leaving a fingerprint of my bare skin behind, has to do with the fact that it's kind of lightly pigmented. It's like sheer buildable, or not sheer, but medium buildable coverage. It's making me think that with cosmetics like this, base products just across the board, the price we pay when we want one that can be applied in a sheer layer, kind of like a tinted moisturizer, but then can also be built up to more coverage. When we want that, we want something that isn't super packed with pigment, right? And the price that we pay then is we forfeit a little bit of durability. We forfeit that super long-lasting quality that I so prize in my base products because I like to be able to just go about my day without worrying that I'm going to disturb them. In my experience, that kind of durability comes with a very high pigment load because even if a little bit comes off, enough stays behind to retain the coverage that you applied at the beginning of the day. And this it doesn't have that. It doesn't have that. It's got a lot of very beautiful qualities. And some of those qualities have been gained by forfeiting a level of durability. So I have to powder this product because that fingerprint, that worries me. That's definitely something that's going to happen throughout the day. It's not as though I'm touching my face with big greasy fingerprints all the time. It's just a brush, a little brush here, a wisp there, a baby's toe here, a cat's whisker there. I mean, things are touching my face over here, y'all. And I just can't have that. I can't have everything that touches my face leaving bare skin behind. I never powder very much. I don't like a thick layer of powder on my skin, but I like to apply a little bit of powder, especially around the edges, my marionette lines, underneath my eyes, my forehead when it's bare like this, like it is today, and around my jawline. And that's what I did today. I powdered. I also applied the Glossier Cloud Paint in Puff. And this lip look, which is actually another two Lisa Eldridge products. So I got the lip pencil in the shade Intrigue. I've been really curious about this color, Intrigue. The lip pencil might be darker than the lipstick, which is supposed to be one of the lightest, if not the lightest, velvet lipstick that she has ever released. Given that it's that, how dark, how pigmented and pink this is quite surprised me. It's much pinker than I was expecting it to be and darker than I was expecting it to be. But the formula is fantastic. Just quick mini review in passing. It's really, really sticky. Very, very sticky and sturdy. It's not slippery. It's a little more difficult to buff out than most lip liners, but I like that because I like to buff out my lip liner to get like a soft blurred edge. But often when you buff something and blur the edge, it's kind of delicate. Again, it's something that's going to wear away over the course of the day. This, you can buff it, and then I feel like that buffed edge is like absolutely bulletproof. This is a very long wearing product, and I quite like that. It's not quite emollient enough though to wear all over the lips as a lip color and just go. I mean, one could do that, but it almost feels like a liquid lipstick to apply it that way. So I put it all over my lips, but then I put a little bit of Kitten Mischief on top of it to make it a bit more comfortable. I know it's been a long time since I referenced the list of questions. I hope you're not feeling too at sea. I'm still answering the question, how does the product apply? I'm basically about to give you my final thoughts on the look after I applied everything on top of it and was finished. So 2 things. 1, the shade match is a little bit off for me. Again, it's better than some of the base products that were already in my collection. Like it's better, for example, than the Sephora Best Skin Ever foundation. And if I were choosing between them, I would definitely choose the Lisa Eldridge. And I have liked this foundation because it is so bright. So I appreciate that it's as light as it is. It's just a bit peachy pink for me compared to my neck and compared to the concealers, again, that have that gray tinge that I love so much. And it's workable. Like I do think that especially at a distance and especially with these lights, my skin looks fantastic today. I mean, come on. Like I'm not over here being like, it looks like garbage. In the camera, like from this distance, it's lovely. And even the shade match, I think probably looks great. I don't think that anybody would look at me, especially not look at the footage and be like, oh my gosh, that woman's face is an entirely different color from her neck. But because I deal with redness, because I am always on a mission to get that redness canceled out, when my face is a different color from my neck, even slightly in the direction of peachy, in the direction of red, pink, or peach, it's just a pet peeve of mine. So that is a little bit of a disappointment. And the other thing that's going on my face right now we're moving into the question, how does it wear throughout the day? Which I've definitely been touching on, talking about leaving the fingerprint, needing to set it with powder, et cetera, et cetera. But this is the full and complete answer to this question, how does it wear throughout the day? It just isn't wearing well for me. And this is, I think, like the 5th or 6th day today that I've applied it. And it just hasn't been wearing all that well for me. The powder doesn't agree with it very well. Right after applying the entire look, I gave you a close-up. I tried to capture some close-up footage of the slightly dry skin right at the top of my forehead and the slightly dry skin that's underneath my eyes. And you can see how it clings to dry patches on a dry-skinned face. This skin doesn't always look dry. When my face is bare and moisturized especially, but even just bare, you can't see those dry patches. It's not like I'm dealing with very dry skin right now, right? This is kind of normal for me. And again, my skin's pretty balanced right now. A little bit on the dry side, but pretty balanced for me, for a dry-skinned person. And there are just a couple places on my skin where directly after application and the addition of powder, and it might partly be the addition of powder, but you should be able to add powder to a product like this without this happening. I think it's the combination of the two, because I use this powder with all of my other products and it doesn't do this with them. There are just some parts of my face at close range that don't look very good and on which you can absolutely see the makeup. It really, really looks like I'm wearing makeup on these parts of my face where it's clinging a little bit. That's directly after application. And now, a couple of hours after application, it's breaking up all over my chin and around my nose. I'll try to give you a close-up now. I do think that it would look much better if I hadn't applied the powder, but I feel like I have to apply the powder to get it to set. So this is what I've been struggling with over the course of these several days that I've been testing it out. The thing I will say for it is that it's pretty easy to repair. I'm going to do it right now. I'll try to do it at closer range. So even with powder on top of it, going in just with the brush that I used to apply it a couple of hours ago and just kind of like pressing and buffing, it now looks gorgeous once again, right? It just kind of seamlessly pressed itself back together and left like a smooth and skin-like surface behind. That is a fantastic quality, possibly one of the best qualities that a product like this could have, like above almost everything else. And that is also true like with the fingerprint thing. Like if it gets a dent in it, you can easily smooth it over just with your fingers. It's not like when you try to repair something like that, it just wipes away and it becomes more and more of an issue. This has also come to bear with like changing my lipstick, my lip products. This is another how does it wear throughout the day thing, especially for me. Yesterday, I had this foundation on and I was filming a couple of videos during which I had to remove and then reapply lip gloss. And every time I wiped a lip product off, there would be a whole strip of bare skin on my upper lip. Wiping my lips off with a napkin or a paper towel or my finger or washcloth or something, even trying to be precise, everywhere that my finger or paper towel touches, it removes this product entirely from my upper lip. And it leaves like this big stripe of bare skin, which is also something that the Fenty product used to do. That was one of the things that I didn't like about it. So that's like, I've got like this whole face on and I start removing a lip product or buffing the edge of a lip product with a brush, which I almost always do no matter what kind of lip product I'm applying. The brush would simultaneously buff the edge of the lip product and remove the foundation above it. And that was very frustrating. I actually dealt with that today when I was applying this lip. So that's different. My Rose Ink concealer doesn't do that. My other base products that I use consistently don't do that. Again, they're more pigmented. So they don't like wipe completely off the skin, even if they get disturbed. That was a little bit of an issue, but it's very easy to repair. So yesterday when it was like 4 or 5 times I changed my lip product while I was filming, and I wiped this product entirely off my upper lip, half of my upper lip every single time. And then every single time I just went and buffed it with a brush or even just a little with my finger, and it was fixed and it was covered again. So it's not a total deal breaker, right? It's something that I can deal with this product because it repairs itself, but it is different from my hardier base products and requires a little bit more labor and is a little bit less convenient. And it also makes me really wary of scratching my nose or wiping if my nose is dripping during the day, which it has been these days quite a bit. I'm afraid to touch my nose during the day because it's a little harder to repair this kind of product around one's nose. And I just feel like even if I just go, and rub my nose or like touch my nose gently with a tissue, based on my experience with other parts of my face, I just know that it's going to remove all the product from around my nose. Like everywhere a tissue or finger touches, it's just going to be like bare skin underneath. So I've had the unpleasant and annoying feeling wearing this product over the past 5 or 6 days that every time I touch my nose, if I care enough to do this, I have to go to a mirror and use my fingers to repair the foundation if I want to repair it. So those are my issues with wear throughout the day. There have actually been quite a number of issues for me with wear throughout the day with this product. And like I was starting to say, I believe that the issue of it breaking up on my skin wouldn't be as much of an issue if I hadn't powdered it. I think there was something about the combination of the powder. It was like the powder sitting on top of the product was sort of moving around kind of funny. I think it would have looked better if I hadn't powdered it, but then it would have been even more susceptible to being wiped away by a stray finger or the stray tip of a kitten's tail. Final thoughts. My first final thought is about my personal base product preferences, which I've really been learning more about over like the past 6 months. And this has just added a whole bunch more evidence to support the hypothesis that I was starting to form. I think I really prefer a highly pigmented formula that is emollient enough so that it can be manipulated into a very thin, physically thin application while still retaining its high level of pigment. I prefer that over a medium coverage product that can be built to full coverage by layering. Those are 2 different kinds of versatility. And it's the first kind that always works better for me because I think it's that medium pigment level, that sort of medium coverage that makes products like this wipe away or pick up when I touch them. So that is what I have learned about myself. And that's definitely one of the things that's causing me to not get along as well as I might have gotten along with this foundation. Now, I have to say, and maybe I should have said this during the how does it wear throughout the day portion. Although no, this is a final thought. It makes sense that this is here. This is another thing that's going on between this and me. Because I have dry skin, I've been very conscientious about moisturizing my skin and prepping my skin before I apply this. Because based on how it has behaved around the driest, these little parts of my face that are the driest right now, if my skin was on the dry side, if it was kind of like a dry-ish face day, and I went in with this product, I know that it would look worse than the way that it's been looking applied on top of nice, plump, moisturized, and prepped skin. However, I think that probably some of that moisturization and prepping is causing it to be less stable on my skin. That might be one of the other things that's causing it to lift up when I touch it because there's so much moisturizer underneath. Not like a ton. It's not like I'm applying it over top of like a really thick layer of moisturizer. And again, today, I think I just had a bit of moisturizer that had been on my skin for a long time, like for hours before I went in with Crystal Nebula. It was just Crystal Nebula underneath it. And this is a lovely serum-y product, but it's not like uber emollient and slippy, and it's supposed to set down. It's supposed to be something you can wear underneath other products. But I think that if I had a different kind of skin, like maybe if I had oily skin and so I wasn't prepping it with so much moisturizing product, maybe it would set down more and be more matte and be more hardy, more sturdy. There might be something about both my skin type and the way that I'm prepping my skin for this product because of my skin type that's causing it not to be as self-setting as it could be on other people's skin. The finish is, I'll say it again, really, really, really beautiful. I mean, every time I applied it, my breath was taken away. Finish-wise, it's probably the best foundation that I've ever seen. Maybe not the best base product, because again, I really like the Rose Ink one, which is quite dewy, but more pigmented. And so it has this like evening quality, but it doesn't have, there's this like ethereal, glossy, smoothing thing that goes on with the LISA Eldridge. And if you apply it over dewy prepped skin, especially over an illuminating product like this, you can get a dewy look like the one that I got today instead of a more matte look. If you put it over a matte primer, which I have done, or if you put it over kind of like a neutral or a pore filling primer, it will look a bit more matte. But I've heard a lot of people saying, oh, it's very matte. It's a very matte foundation. You're going to be surprised how matte it is. And I've found that it really, really depends on how you prep your skin. It is such a pleasure to apply it, especially on top of a luminous base, and to see the change in the skin, to see the way that the surface of the skin looks when it is smoothed over it. And because of that lovely experience, how luxurious it feels, how cosmetically elegant it is, because of all of that, in spite of the issues that I have with longevity, I would probably reach for it pretty frequently if the color match were more perfect. If the color match were perfect, right? If it were spot on in the way that some of my other base products are, if it were more neutral and more gray, I could see myself starting to use it quite a lot, especially for no makeup days, just like 1 or 2 pumps all over the face with my hands and go. As it is, the color isn't quite right, isn't quite as good as some other things that I have. And again, because I'm redness prone, I just hate looking even a little bit pinker than I actually am. As it is, I will probably take this home with me when I go home for the holidays and see if it's a perfect match for any of the members of my family, all of whom are very pale, but one of whom might have like slightly pinker skin than I do. I'm not exactly sure of everyone's undertones, but I'll take it. We'll do a little swatching. And then if someone wants it, I'll give it away to that person. And because I don't love it more than my Rose Ink concealer, because I don't love the formula more, I'm not really inclined to repurchase it in a shade that's closer to mine. And also, I don't know if any of the other shades are going to be more like this sort of like grayish neutral color that I use. I think that for a lot of people, this is going to be the dream foundation. And I think that all of its qualities are intentional, even the ones that are making it less than perfect for me. I think it is exactly what it's supposed to be. For me, the slight fussiness on my skin, having to worry about leaving a fingerprint on it, wiping it away, especially scratching my nose or wiping it off of my upper lip when I'm applying something to my lips, all of that fussiness makes it less compelling to me than my hyperpigmented base products that are sturdier because of their level of pigment, but are as skin-like because of their formulas. I got one of these LISA Eldridge liquid Lurexes. I wasn't going to review this product, but a lot of you requested it. And when I saw that they had launched, I was like, I'll just get one and then I'll be able to talk to you about it, demonstrate it, and I'll make a fun little video. And that's what we're doing today. So it's not a super deep dive because I've only had it for a couple of days and I have worn it a couple of times. This is not a total first impressions, but I'm going to be giving you like my impressions after a couple of days, my initial impressions, applying it for you on camera, and just kind of like giving you my thoughts on this launch and this product and the formula and how it performs and everything. I got the color, well, I'm not going to tell you what color I got yet because I'm going to go into like why I chose this color in a moment. And it was kind of interesting. It was like process of elimination because I didn't like any of the colors. But I will say, I'm consulting my notes, that the reason that I only got one is that I don't really like liquid eyeshadow. And so I was getting this just for review. I was using the budget that my channel sets aside for this kind of thing. And I didn't want to take too big a bite out of the budget because I've been reviewing like a lot. I feel like I've been reviewing a lot of LISA Eldridge lately, but it was really just that foundation. I just reviewed an expensive Lisa Eldridge product. And so I was like, let's just pick one, just get it done, and then like save most of that budget for self-sponsored review for something else. The other reason that I was motivated to just pick one is that I didn't think I was gonna like it because I don't usually like this kind of product. It's something about my eye shape. I have these hooded lids and they're hooded all across, but especially like in the outer corner, it's like hard for me to get a good blend with a liquid shadow right in the outer corner, and hard for me to build liquid shadow there and get it to stick. And at the same time, I depend on building shadow in the outer corner to create any kind of dimension and depth in my eyes because the lids are hooded. So it's like the very thing that I want to do with my eyeshadow because of their shape makes it hard for me to apply liquid eyeshadow because of my shape. I think that sentence went completely into the toilet. And also I was talking about my eye shape, not my shape. I've never loved a liquid eyeshadow except for the Stila glitters, but I just treated them like glitter toppers, not like actual liquid eyeshadows where you like paint it on and sculpt a look. I've never loved one and I've never kept one. I've like given away all of the ones that I've ever tested. So I treaded lightly on this release and I just got the one. Let's talk about color. So there are 5 colors and I was like, I'm gonna get one. And I went and I looked at the selection and it was tough because I looked at the shade range and I was like, where are the browns and the minks? You know what I mean? Like the rich, minky browns. I know that there is one that she says is taupe, one of the 2 very light shades, but to me, it doesn't look taupe. It looks kind of like a rose color, like a pinky peach to me. I know from experience that with single eyeshadow looks, especially liquids, if it's too pale or too close to my skin tone or paler than my skin tone, it'll like really, really blank out my lids and almost make my eyes look even smaller than they already do when there's nothing on them. I think it's beautiful in theory and works on a lot of people, but I just know from experience that not only do I not usually like liquid eyeshadow, but I particularly don't get along with those ones. They're just like a wash of champagne on the lids. So those 2 lightest colors were out for me. And there's one that is like a copper, being advertised as a copper. And I feel like copper plagues me in makeup. Like every bronze always ends up looking orange or looking copper. So I didn't even really consider the copper. I was like, no, copper's not the one for me. I'm done with copper. The dark one was very compelling because I love a really dark sparkly shadow, but it's definitely gray, not black, too graphite, too cool toned. And so by process of elimination, I ended up choosing a Lauren, which is the one that is advertised as like a gold leaf gold. I like the allusion to Klimt. I really love the work of Gustav Klimt, and I like the idea of like a Klimt gold leaf color for makeup. I also sometimes use this color when I'm doing looks with a gold palette, the Natasha Denona gold palette, and I like the way that like super warm gold leafy gold looks on my lids, but I don't tend to use it that much because it does lean a little bit into orange. And then when I do it, I like it. So I was like, maybe having this to test will sort of push me in that direction a little bit more than I usually go, and I think that that might not be a bad thing. So that's why I ended up with this one. It was like I settled for the color that I found the least disappointing because I was very interested in the formula, intrigued by the formula and curious about it, and because I wanted to test it for YouTube. So then it arrived and I opened it. It's just what you would expect. It's in line with everything else that she's done. Completely stunning. And the interior packaging is as well. But look! Girl, look how orange you look. It's so copper. I thought that it was the wrong one. I thought they'd sent me the copper one by mistake when I opened it. I was like looking at it and looking at it. I mean, come on. Like, would you ever in a million years call this color gold? That to me is copper. Like, this is orange to me. So I went to the internet and I looked up the pictures. And then I saw that the copper, the one that they're calling copper, which is called Diana, it's more of like a rich, bright, deep peach. And I actually feel like that would have been the one for me. I wish that I hadn't been so scared by the word copper and I had actually considered it more, because that actually looks quite beautiful. And now that I've seen this one in person, I'm like, that's the one that I like the most out of the whole launch. I'm not saying that this is an ugly color, not by any means. And spoiler alert, when I started playing with and applying it to my eyes, it grew on me. The color grew on me. And I kind of started to see how they ended up with the product shots that they have, even though in person And even on the eyes, I feel like it looks pretty different. I feel like it definitely looks darker and more orange than it looks in the pictures on the website. But the fact remains that I felt and kind of still feel extremely misled about color when it comes to this. And of course, I can't speak for the other 4 colors. I can't speak to whether or not they look quite a bit different in person than they do in the imagery. But this one I feel does. I feel like if you love copper or like golden copper, then this is the one for you, not Diana, which is the one that they're calling copper. All of that said, my first impressions of this, putting it on the night that it arrived and then putting it on again yesterday, it is everything that Lisa said that it is. I mean, the formula is stunning. It's creamy, it's lightweight, it's extremely blendable, gives you some time to work with it, and then it sets. When it sets completely. It's really amazing. Very, very, very thin wash on the eyes. Probably the best liquid eyeshadow formula I've ever touched, ever applied. I mean, it's really exquisitely done. I say this as someone who doesn't like liquid eyeshadow, right? I can appreciate how perfectly executed this product is. The shine and the sparkles are also divine. I hope you'll be able to see in this light. It spangles. It's like these teeny tiny sparks that spangle, and it's just very, very beautiful. So all of the claims are true. And the packaging's also great. I love that you screw it in the cap and then, I don't know if you'll be able to hear that, it clicks shut. For a liquid product, I think that that's a fantastic feature because you can always be sure when you feel that click, you can be sure that it's airtight and it's not going to dry out. This to me looks like a copper penny, but the reflect is very gold. And I think that that's where they're getting that much lighter, more neutral gold imagery. It's like the color of the reflect is more the gold leaf. But the base color, it's orange. It's definitely orange. I mean, it's definitely copper. There I turned off one of my softbox lights, and now I've turned off my ring light. So there's just one softbox coming from one direction, that direction. So you can kind of see a little bit more of how it sparkles. All the lights are back on now, and this on top is like the blended out swatch. So you can see that it shears out to something much more sort of skin-like. But honestly, blending it out, I feel like makes the reflect less intense because it like disperses the gold pearl, and it makes it look even more copper from every angle. And this is so interesting, I think. So it's dried down completely, the blended out swatch. When I rub my finger across it, it picks up a little bit of the sparkle, which I think is a great quality. I think that I understand why this is happening. There's so much sparkle in it. It's not transferring like the pigments transferring. It is totally dry, and I don't feel like this picking up of sparkle indicates that it would crease or anything because it's a really lovely long wearing formula. I just think that she maximized the mix-in, like the amount of pearls, the number of little sparkles, so much that once it dries, it's like there's so much sparkle that it can flake off or it can be picked up if you touch it. But I feel like that's totally worth it. I think sometimes liquid eyeshadow is less sparkly because they haven't put enough sparkle in to make it really, really spangly because they don't want this to happen. And so I feel like if it's a choice between having it be less sparkly but super stable, or more sparkly and something that might give off a little bit of sparkle if it's touched, like almost like flaking of sparkle, I'm glad that she went in this direction. For me, it's to my taste and I like that. Let's apply it. I think what I will do is put a dot on an eyelid and blend out with my fingers so you can see what that will look like. It's really, really shiny and wet looking, and I really like that. You can even see it like from a distance, right? I think that because my eyes are hooded the way they are, that one tiny dot, I didn't spread it very far. I didn't get it into my outer corner really, and I didn't get it very far up on my lids. So this for me is just going to flash like when I blink, and when I have my eyes open, you're going to see maybe a slight orange haze in the crease, but it doesn't really do what I usually do with eyeshadow. It doesn't change the shape of my eye, enhance the eye, sculpt the eye, like deepen the socket, make the eyes look bigger. It doesn't do any of that. It just adds this really, really pretty, sparkly, wet look sheen that you see when I blink. I think that there are a lot of people who that's all that they want from eyeshadow. And sometimes that's all that I want from eyeshadow. And for that, this is a very elegant product, very easy to use. It's already dry, and I think that it looks effortless, and it was pretty much effortless, and it looks very elegant. My first thought when I started blending this out like that for the first time on my lid, my first thought was like, I would give this to someone who isn't good with makeup or who doesn't feel confident with makeup. I would absolutely recommend this or give this to like a sister or a friend or somebody who's just like, I want something sparkly for my lids, but I don't have any techniques and I'm not good at it, you know? So I'm going to just get the other eye caught up and then we'll maybe try with a brush and see what happens. It's pretty. It's undeniably pretty. It's like the perfect, best designed version that one can imagine of a product that I don't really like a style of product that I don't really like. And the reason I don't really like it is because what I was just describing about what I think some people really want from makeup that this is delivering, I like that, but it's not enough for me with my eye shape to achieve what I'm usually trying to achieve when I'm featuring my eyes with makeup. But I want to use a brush and kind of fuss with it and see if we can get it there and like see what that looks like and see what like the results are when I try to do that. And when I say that, what I'm trying to do is to build product in the outer corner to provide some depth and a little bit of structure, to bring it much higher up on my lids, closer to my brows and be diffused all over the lid so the entire lid shines really wetly, and also to be buffed out on the lower lash line. I love like a monochromatic all around the eye look that's dense in the outer corner and super shiny and just like covers the eye area and makes it large. And I actually have achieved that or an approximation of that just with my fingers and the doe foot. And I'll tell you, it worked fine, but it was hard to get it just using my fingers and building and building and building. It was hard to get it to stick in the outer corner. So today I'm going to try to achieve that with brushes. So I'm going to start by putting a dot of this in the outer corner, trying to keep it kind of dense there, and then blend out with a brush. And I'll be using, I love the brushes that Refer makes that are like these small versions of blending brushes. I think that some of them were made specifically with hooded eyes in mind or with smaller eyes in mind. I love these like mini blending brushes. I'll try to remember which one. I have this one, which is the 14, and then this other one, which is just like a tiny bit smaller than it. I'll try to put the actual numbers down below. I know I always forget to do that. So painting it on with the paddle to fill the entire area that I wanted it, the entire area over which I wanted it to be like really dense. And then using this small fluffy brush to just diffuse the edges, but letting the center stay dense worked beautifully. And I feel like this is the most controlled application of this product that I've gotten so far. I feel like it's the best application. I think that what I've realized, this is the third time, what I've realized over the course of these 3 times messing with it is that if you just want a sheen on the lids, then this product can definitely be used with your fingers. If you want something a little bit more sculpted, like a little bit more like a makeup look, you want a little more control, I feel like you've got to go into the brushes and use the brushes. At least on my eye shape, that's the case. But I'm kind of feeling this. I'm actually kind of feeling this. Let's get the other eye caught up. I mean, it's just gleaming. It's just so shiny. I feel like it's become, I feel like my job has become comparing shiny things to other shiny things and making a judgment call about which thing is shinier than the other shiny thing. It's like the shininess Olympics over here. And I mean, I'm not holding it up next to other shiny things and comparing them, but I'm just telling you from my vast wealth of knowledge that this is one of the shiniest things I've ever put on my eyes. It's shining more than other shiny things. Not all other shiny things, but a lot of shiny things aren't this shiny. All right, let's buff it out on the lower lash line. So I'm applying it directly with the paddle, and then I'm going in with this, the Refer 02. Where I often get into trouble with my eye shape is when I'm buffing a shadow on the lower lash line and connecting it to the upper shadow here in the corner, right in this area in the outer corner, it's like the brush starts to pick up. It's like a little bit of crinkly there and a little bit of watery there, and the brush starts to like wear away whatever's there. So that's like the trouble spot, especially with liquids, but this seems to be handling it pretty well. Underneath my eye on this side, my skin is like really dry right now, like definitely peeling visibly. And it's just the way that it is. It's like, I don't know if you can see it with all these beauty lights. They're designed to obscure stuff like that. But if you can, I'm aware. It's just real life, real skin, real winter skin. All right, I'm feeling actually a lot more obsessed with this than I thought I would be, or than I kind of have been. What I want now, I think this is perfectly, this is enough. This is definitely a look with this shadow rather than just being like an easy all over the lid application with the finger. But I want to build it up even more on the lids just to show you what it can do. So I'm just gonna do that and maybe blend up a tiny bit more. I'm really taking a risk putting it on both eyes at once, and I have to blend not super fast, but pretty fast. So I'm bringing it like higher up, closer to my brow in the center of my lids, trying to kind of make the center of the lids look taller, and that makes the lids look rounder because it looks like the center is gleaming more, and that makes it look like it's closer to the viewer. Okay, there we really got the drama. And I think that one of the reasons that I'm finding this easier to blend the edges of than a lot of liquid shadows is that quality that I demonstrated for you when it had completely dried on my hand, but then I was able to rub it and get a little bit of the sparkle to come off. Because as it dries, the sparkle still retains a little bit of flexibility. So as it's drying and I'm blending and blending and blending, I'm able to like blend the edge using the sparkle and disperse the sparkle beyond the edge of where the base has set. And that does a lot of things. It means that a wider surface area looks shiny and looks wet. And it also means that I'm less likely to get that like hard edge of dried product that you can't blend, that kind of like build up on the edge of product. That frustrates me so much about a lot of cream and liquid shadows. And that means that I for the most part, avoid them. I've never had that issue with this in the 3 days that I've been playing with it. Okay, here's what's happening. I was prepared to continue to be extremely lukewarm about the color, but I just feel like this looks undeniably fierce, and so I can't really be mad at it. And I do feel like because the reflect is powerfully kind of special and subtle, there is something different about it than other things that I have. So I feel like it has added something to my resources, like my makeup resources. It's put a tool into my collection that I didn't really have before. It is selling itself to me, even though I was surprised and like a little bit disappointed by how incredibly orangey the color was at the outset. I kind of like how it looks without mascara. I'm trying to lean more into this like splinky, pale, washed out lashes look. And I feel like to wear this to a party without mascara would really be that. But today I'm going to apply mascara because I feel like we want to see what that would look like. I'm still testing this Chantecaille mascara. It does give an undeniably beautiful lash. This product could definitely be used as an accent for a more dramatic, more sculptural look, a more complicated look. I mean, I haven't even used eyeliner or anything. It's just this, which is, I kind of feel like that's what it's designed for. Like that's what it's asking for. And that's what it makes me want to do. Something really, really simple like this, simple but striking. But it would clearly work beautifully as just like a topper or something. It's just, of course it would, you know? And so I'm a little more interested. I feel like it's obvious that it would work well that way. A lot of really shiny, sparkly liquid eyeshadows work well that way. So I'm a little more interested in how it looks just by itself. It's maybe starting to just getting like a little bit of a crack, like the way that it dried, maybe because I was opening and closing my eyes. It has a teeny bit of like a crack in it here, but it doesn't look, it looks like not worn out, but it looks like comfortable. You know what I mean? It looks like lived in, or like something you could live in. And it's still very shiny, and no one would ever be like, oh, your makeup's busted the house down, you know, but it does look just a tiny bit textured in one spot. I think it was probably like the way I applied it or what I was doing when I applied it. I meant to say that it hasn't irritated my eyes at all. And I have eyes that are prone to being watery, and that gets stingy, you know what I mean? It's very, very mild. It feels like it's completely non-irritating. I feel like this is a good option for people who tend to struggle to find a thing like this that doesn't make their eyes sting and water. And I've gotten it basically like in my eyes like especially rubbing it on my lower lash line. For what it is, it's perfect, right? Like a liquid shadow that sparkles and shines and does this and sets down. It's absolutely perfect. I still don't love what it is. Both the fact that it's a liquid shadow, it's not like my favorite kind of thing to work with, and this color, as much as it's grown on me, isn't my favorite color to wear on my eyes. So it's like, for what it is it's perfect, but I just don't particularly love what it is. The color thing, I still, especially since the formula has impressed me so much and I've enjoyed using it, especially with a brush, more than I thought I would. I wish that each color were just slightly different, or obviously that there were twice as many of them and there were like colors that I liked. But I feel like each of the colors she released, aren't quite to my taste. So I wish that the one that's being called taupe were just a little bit more of like a biscuity, beigey brown, like a little deeper and a little more actually brown instead of being that like pinky purpley taupe. I wish that the pinky one were more, again, like grubbier, grittier, had more multicolored sparkles in it, which is a little bit more dynamic. I wish that this gold had been more neutral, more kind of like a gold mixed with silver, like a bright champagne-y gold or like a bronzy gold, rather than being like this intensely coppery gold. The copper Diana, I actually really like now that I've seen it for what it is and seen that it's like this rich peach. I actually kind of like that one and I wish that I had it. But the dark one, the gray, the charcoal, if it were me, I'd make it like more black rather than being like a gunmetal, or even more brown, like just warmer. I just would like to see that be warmer. I'd also love to see like a straight up, really rich, deep brown, like that kind of cocoa color that's so rich and deep. It's like reddish, or almost like purplish. I would love to see that in this formula. I'd also love to see a clear one, like one that doesn't have much base pigment, but has like a ton of multicolored sparkle or spangly sparkle so that it looks really, really wet on the lids. Like I feel like there's a lot of potential for this because the formula is so good to make the perfect wet look shine topper, like the perfect alternative to an eye gloss. I hope she expands the shade range because the formula is excellent. We know that I love a wet look lid, and this does look wet. Unfortunately, it just also looks orange. My Lisa Eldridge eyeshadow review, finally. It's been in the works for a long time, partly because my order took a long time to ship, and then it took a long time to get here. So I was already at a disadvantage, but the main reason that it's taken so long is that I like to be extremely thorough when it comes to my reviews of these intrigue-generating makeup launches. That means this is likely to be a long video, so I'm going to timestamp the sections. You can skip around if you're only interested in parts. And this is what the parts are going to be. Part 1 is going to be about the experience of touching the shadows themselves in person and the way that they look in person. So for that, I'll be giving you close-up overhead footage so you can really get as much of a sense as possible through the screen of what the shadows are actually like. And I'll go ahead and tell you that the 2 eyeshadow palettes that I have are Cinnabar and Vega. I also ordered 2 single eyeshadows, both from the Sorcery palette. The singles are Madrigal and Mercurial. Part of why I chose to review so many eyeshadows from this launch, 2 palettes and 2 singles, is that there were just bits and pieces of each palette that really intrigued me. So after doing all the overhead swatches, I dismantled the 2 palettes and I assembled what is for me the ideal collection of 6 out of the palettes and the singles that I was reviewing. So that'll be part 2 of the video. I'll show you my rearranging and my little custom Lisa palette. And then in part 3 of the video, I'll talk about the shadows in use, what it's actually like to apply them to the eyes, how the different formulas perform with brushes and with fingers on the eyes, and I'll roll the footage that I took of myself applying this eye look, the one that I'm wearing right now. Then in part 4, I'll give my final thoughts on these eyeshadows so far. I've been testing them for close to a month. And at the end, I'll tack on the swatches and just brief discussions of these 2 lipsticks, which I put into the order as well. Velvet Sorcery is probably of the most interest Pinterest. It was newly launched along with these eyeshadows. But I also purchased Velvet Affair because it's one of the colors that intrigued me the most. It is from a past launch from which I didn't make any purchases at the time. So I'll also be swatching and discussing that and giving some swatch comparisons for those two lipsticks. Section 1 of the video, what are the shadows really like in person when it comes to texture and color? Let's jump right into this close-up overhead footage, starting with Vega, which is the cool toned smoky eye palette in this collection. I was excited about this palette because of all the taupes and because of the black shadow and because there are two that promise to be really quite shiny. I'm always after truly neutral makeup because I have a neutral, desaturated, slightly olive-leaning complexion. So I find that grays with too much blue in them tend to go very blue on me. Bronzes with too much copper in them tend to go very orange on me. When I want to wear color, of course, I love color for its own sake, but I have found that it can be particularly difficult for me to find shadows that are actually neutral and not like a super saturated and actually quite colorful aspect of neutral or version of a neutral. So I was most curious to see how very cool toned this would be, how blue the grays would lean, how gray the grays would lean, or if there would be that sort of neutral, almost like warm and cool taupe presence in here. And of course, I was curious about the formulas. This palette has 3 seamless mattes in it, and as far as I understand it, the seamless matte formula is LISA's basic matte. She talked about having mixed a teeny bit of shimmer into it to kind of make it smoother, make sure that it's not going to patch or be chalky. And I appreciate that. I love a slightly satin-leaning matte shadow. And then Vega has 1 each of 3 of her other formulas, 1 metallic, 1 luminous shadow, and 1 velvet. And those are the 3 that I swatched first. So I swatched Moon Swirl, which is the metallic, Supernova, which is the luminous shade, and French Gray, which is the velvet. And as far as I understand it, the velvet is the other matte formula. It's supposed to be more of a cream to powder. Moon Swirl and Supernova, the 2 shiny shades in this palette, are both really beautiful. Moon Swirl is a slightly cool-leaning taupe metallic, but I find it is right down the middle. When I apply it, it doesn't look like I'm wearing extremely gray, like grayscale makeup. It has just like a touch of warmth, just a little bit of something, and it looks great all over the lids just by itself. Supernova, the luminous shade, has that lovely pearlescent quality. It works well on the brow bone, inner corner, all over the lid. It's exactly what it looks like it would be like from the swatch. French Gray is a very pale cream to powder matte, sort of like an elephant gray. It's definitely a gray, but it also has a little bit of that grounding warmth, that muddling neutrality that makes it appeal to me that much more as a color. However, the velvet formula, it's like a little bit hard to get purchase on. I actually found this to be true in a way of all of the mattes, like the seamless mattes and the velvets. You can really see it in this little swatch here. It's quite pale, which is part of the issue, but I think you could see how much more eyeshadow picked up on my fingers when I swatched the 2 metallics, how much more effortless it was, or how much less effortful it was for me to get a dense little swatch that really represents them. And then the 3rd swatch there, French Gray, the velvet, it's just a little stickier, a little bit less rich, more resistant. It does that thing that some cream to powders do where it sort of compresses into the pan. It's not exactly hard pan, it's not the same thing. It sort of compresses into the pan when you're trying to swatch it instead of really transferring to your finger. And that can result in a little bit poorer of a swatch and also a little bit poorer of transfer to your finger if you're using your finger to apply it to your lids. And in my experience, makes it a little bit harder to pick up on a brush as well. It may just be that cream to powder matte formulas aren't my favorite. I've never gotten along super well with them, not in the Natasha Denona palettes, not in the Alter Ego palettes that are duping those Natasha Denona cream to powder formulas. This kind of turned out to be no exception to that, and I think you can see what I'm talking about in the swatch. The seamless mattes, which are Turbulence, Smoke and Mirrors, and Lamp Black, are a different story when it comes to swatching and how they pick up on the fingers and how they pick up on the brush. They still feel to me like they have a creaminess to the touch, especially compared to something like a Pat McGrath matte. It's a completely different beast from a Pat McGrath matte. And in fact, if Velvet, this actual cream to powder formula, didn't exist, I would be calling these a cream to powder formula because they have still that sort of slight damp damp, slippy quality. It's not just the sheen from whatever tiny bit of mica is mixed in here. I feel like there's also a bit of a sheen that's coming from whatever the medium is that's holding the pigment together. They just have a slidiness and creaminess to the touch that you usually find in metallic shadows, but in a formula that is essentially matte. The swatches are really satisfying, like really gratifying because of that. You can see it on my fingers. You can see it on the swatches in the back of my hand here. They have like an inky paintiness, and I love anything with texture, with interesting and gratifying texture. So I was excited to get to know these, to work with them. And you can see when I swatch them on the back of my hand here that even though there's a little bit of a maybe thick quality in the swatch on my fingers, they lay down very thinly and smoothly on the skin. Turbulence, the seamless matte on the left, is quite a warm taupe actually, and Smoke and Mirrors, the one in the middle, is an extremely blue leaning gray. Like, this is a color that I don't really get along with. To me, it's the one major outlier in this palette. For those two shadows there, if I were designing this, like if I got to choose, I would choose to make both of them more neutral. So it would take out a little of the warmth and turbulence, would take out all of the blue in Smoke and Mirrors, give us something a little bit more subtle in the way that French gray is as a gray. But I understand the impulse to include both a warm toned taupe and a cool toned gray in a smoky eye palette to make it more versatile. That's one way to make it more versatile. The other way would be to make everything more neutral. Choosing between the two, for me, it's definitely Turbulence, the warm leaning taupe. That's a really beautiful basic shadow for me. And actually, of the three gray mattes in this palette, French gray, Turbulence, and Smoke and Mirrors, the only one that's really, really useful that I feel like is mine and kind of belongs to my collection and is one that I'll use over and over again is Turbulence. The black Lisa Eldridge eyeshadow, Lamp Black, is a slight off black in my opinion. It's just soft. It's a soft black. And in my opinion, it's that way by default because of the formula. This seamless matte formula, it's got, again, that slippy, soft, sort of fading quality to the pigment, almost as if every one of these seamless matte shadows has like some medium mixed into it. That means that I don't think that this formula can be truly super saturated with dark pigment the way that some more powdery, more traditional matte black shadows are. And you'll see that when I compare this to another black shadow, like my blackest black shadow. But I'm bringing it up now kind of as a way of getting even further into what the formula is like. The thing that they remind me the most of actually is the Lethal Cosmetics matte formula. And I have the same experience with the Lethal Cosmetics black. It's a really lovely neutral black. It's just that because of the medium, because of the way that the shadow's formulated, the way that it blends, I want to use the word silicone-y because that's what I associate with this texture, but I don't think it's by virtue of there being silicone in the formula. It's just, you know, like a pore filling primer, the way that that kind of makeup blends out, like Old Benefit Porefessional, that kind of thing. It just has that kind of slip. These shadows feel like they have a little bit of that quality in them, just like the Lethal mattes do. And I think that this Lamp Black was the blackest black that they could get, given that the formula is the way it is. So I hope that tells you even more about this seamless matte formula. Okay, let's look at Cinnabar, which is the sort of like warm brown palette. I originally thought I wasn't going to choose this because I took one look at it and I was like, it's going to go orange on me. It's orange. And my experience with Lisa Eldridge lipstick and the liquid eyeshadow is that things that look like a neutral warm brown or neutral copper or even bronze on the website and in her videos, they arrive at my house and they're orange. And I already, again, struggle. I feel like everything goes orange on me. My experience, just side note, is that way a little bit with the lipsticks as well. There sort of seems to be like more of a brown quality in a lipstick online or more of a taupe quality or neutral quality, and then it'll arrive at my house and it'll just be pink, on me at least. My experience is just that despite how some of the eyeshadows and lipsticks look when compared to the other ones on the website, in reality, compared to the full range of color in makeup, there just isn't very much grunge, if any at all, in the Lisa Eldridge color range. Things tend to lean quite blue, quite pink, quite orange, rather than leaning more taupe, more brown, more bronze. Golds tend to lean very yellow and very orange rather than leaning more neutral, more champagne. Browns tend to lean more pink rather than leaning more dun. However, I talked myself into this as one of my 2 palettes for review because I absolutely had to get my hands on the top coat Ritual, because you know that a really, really wet look, sheer, shiny gold eyeshadow, like a top coat like this, that's one of my most used kinds of eyeshadow. I'm intimately familiar with the Natasha Denona version of that from the gold palette, Kava, and I'm intimately familiar with the Pat McGrath version of that eyeshadow, a couple of different versions of it actually from Pat McGrath. So if I was going to do one thing in this review, it was going to be to compare Ritual, that top coat, to other eyeshadows like it that I've known and loved and talked about a lot on camera. So I was thinking of just getting it as a single and buying the Sorcery palette because of Madrigal and Mercurial. They were really calling my name. But then I saw Lisa swatching the 3 mattes in this palette. There are 2 seamless mattes and there's 1 velvet. And that rich, kind of slightly glossier, satiny matte formula in these rich, red-leaning, bronzy, ochre, earthy colors, that just really got me where I live. And I realized that I was likely to have, if the formulas worked out for me, much more practical use in the day-to-day for those shadows than I would have for like the blues and greens in the Sorcery palette. So I decided to get this whole palette and to just get the 2 singles from Sorcery that were calling my name. However, when I opened this palette for the first time, I was immediately disappointed by how copper everything looked. And Ritual shocked me with how dry and dull, honestly, it ended up swatching and performing compared to what I was expecting. I do think it's by design, and I'll get into that in my final thoughts or later in the video, maybe before my final thoughts. But for now, let's discuss the swatches of Cinnabar. So I swatched the 3 shiny shadows first. Lost Summer, which is a metallic, Bronzite, which is also a metallic, and Ritual, the aforementioned top coat. The metallic formula, of course, is beautiful. I think it's impossible, basically, these days to mess up a metallic formula. So my question about these was more about color. And yeah, they're both copper. This is, to me, not bronze. This is a copper palette. And these are 2 shades of metallic copper eyeshadow. They're very pretty in the abstract, and if I were going to use one a lot, it would actually probably be Lost Summer, the one that has more actual red in it rather than orange. But I haven't found myself using either of them very much because an orange or a copper eye look on me looks extremely orange, and I just am not into that these days. The way that I used to be, the way that kind of everybody used to be on YouTube. It's just not my first choice. It's not my first, second, third, fourth, or fifth choice these days. And Ritual, I think you'll be able to see in these very close swatches exactly what it's like. It is sheer, it is pale, it is shiny, but it's not even close to being wet looking. It is just an extremely subtle version of a shiny topper. A totally different creature from what I've come to think of as a sheer shiny topper. It is for the faint of heart. That's what I'll say. It is for the faint of heart when it comes to shininess on the lids. If you just don't want your lids to be that shiny, but you want a top coat that adds some sparkle and texture, just a little bit of something, that's what Ritual is. It's the sheer shiny top coat for the faint of heart. I think Lisa knows her market. Again, I think it's by design. It's just when it comes to this exact kind of eyeshadow, I'm looking for like a drenched looking lid, and Ritual did not deliver that. But you know, my lids are looking pretty wet and shiny today, so it's not as though she doesn't have anything that can make your lids really shiny. It's just that I was expecting Ritual to be the one that does the most, and it's totally not. I found the top coat formula to be the least shiny, the least gratifying, the least textural of all of the shiny formulas that she's released. So let's talk about the 3 mattes in Cinnabar. Raw Sienna is a seamless matte. Fired Earth is also a seamless matte. And then Deep Ochre is a velvet. And here's the thing. When I hold my 3 fingertips up really close to the camera with these 3 shadows on them, Deep Ochre is the one all the way on the left. That's a velvet shadow. I love that color. It was these that convinced me to get this palette for review. But up close like this, don't they look like the same formula? Isn't it confusing that Deep Ochre is the reddish brown one, and that's the velvet formula, which is again the creamed powder? Fired Earth is supposed to be a seamless matte. They just both look like cream to powder formulas to me here. They both have that slight wet quality, that slight creamy quality, that slight sheeny quality. All three of them. I mean, Raw Sienna, the pale one here, is also supposed to be a seamless matte. But you can really see what I'm talking about when I say that if the Velvet formula wasn't declared by Lisa to be a cream to powder, then I would be calling the seamless matte a cream to powder, because they all feel like cream to powder mattes to me. They all feel like they're mixed with some sort of slightly gummy, slidey medium. And there are pros and cons to that. One of the pros is that the swatches are really amazing, especially with these, again, kind of inky, painty colors. I don't have much use for Raw Sienna. It goes like very pale orange on me. Again, not really interested in that. It's both too pale for me to really make much use of and too orange. But the other two are right up my alley. Even though Deep Ochre does lean a little bit more copper than I thought that it would, it stays close enough to neutral, like muddy enough, that I still love it. However, when it comes to this palette altogether, for me personally, as someone who doesn't really use true copper eyeshadows, as someone who wants a top coat to be really wet look and shiny, and given that Raw Sienna goes very kind of orangey peach on me, there are only 2 out of 6 eyeshadows in this palette that speak to me, that like make me want to use them, make me want to keep them. And they're the 2 dark mattes that we were just talking about. The last 2 shadows that I swatched. I think it's a really pretty palette, but when it comes to these shadows in practice, those are the only 2 that fit with my preferences. And I definitely didn't know that based on the way that this looked online and in the videos. I thought that it was going to be a little bit more bronze. I thought that Raw Sienna and Lost Summer might both be too orange for me, but I was expecting all of the rest of them to be neutral and shiny enough to work for me. So this palette ended up being not quite what I expected, and unfortunately in the direction that makes it less useful for me than I was hoping that it would be. And again, that's all about color and texture preferences. That's specific to me. There's nothing like empirical disappointing about this or wrong with it, and I think it's all by design, but for me, it didn't quite hit. The palettes themselves are delightful. The packaging is really sweet, elegant, covetable, easy to use. Even though when I first saw Cinnabar, I was like, oh, it really is. It was just like my experience with the liquid Lurex all over again. I was like, oh, I thought I was buying a warm bronzy palette, and I ended up with an orange palette. Even though that's the case, my primary feeling was just excitement at getting to play with these and excitement about the colors and textures that were speaking to me between the 2 palettes, because there were quite a number of them between the 2 palettes. Okay, let's talk about the singles, the 2 singles that I ordered, Mercurial and Magical. Y'all, they arrived absolutely decimated, like creamed. They just did not survive in shipping. And I'll show you the way that they looked when they arrived. I opened them up and I just left them on my vanity like they were, and then I carried them down here and put them underneath the camera so you can see the way that they arrived. And here's the thing. I have absolutely no doubt in the world that if I wrote to Lisa Eldridge customer service and told them that this had happened, they would send replacements. I know that they would. Lisa Eldridge customer service is notoriously attentive and helpful. In fact, when I was placing this order, I forgot to include the free velvet pouch. It was free with your order, but you had to like add it in. I forgot to do that. And as soon as I placed the order and I realized my error, I emailed customer service and I said, is there any way to like add the free gift in? And I got an email back in like an hour. And the person was like, no problem, I've added it to your order, which is just amazing. Like in this day and age, given how customer service goes with most companies, truly amazing that they were that on point and that they're willing to do it and able to do it. So again, there's no doubt in my mind that I could get a refund for these shadows if I asked for it, or get replacements for these shadows if I asked for them. But I don't want replacements for them. That's partly because I feel like I have too much eyeshadow as it is, and I just got these for review, and I can review them in their decimated condition. You know what I mean? You can still touch the eyeshadow, swatch it, apply it, and see what it's like. I don't need them to be in pristine condition for me to give a good review. And their primary purpose, the reason that I spent some of my channel's budget for review on these eyeshadows, was to review them. So the fact that they arrived broken isn't keeping me from using them for the thing that I got them for. That's one reason why I haven't asked to have them replaced. But the other reason is that they're both really, really creamy, flaky eyeshadows. And I felt pretty confident that by just pressing with a paper towel, I would be able to reconstitute them, press them back into the pan. So I show them to you when I was filming overhead. I showed the condition in which they arrived so you could see. And then I pressed them back into their pans, which is what I've been planning to do the whole time, so you could see how that went as well. And you can see that they actually reconstituted really well, right? They stuck to themselves, like the eyeshadow stuck to itself. I pressed it pretty firmly into the pan. They're not exactly good as new, but they're definitely good enough for me going forward. So that's the other reason that I don't need them replaced. They're both clearly really beautiful. I love creamy, shiny, textured things. Of the two of them, I would say that Mercurial actually impressed me more. It kind of reminds me of some of my Pat McGrath special shades, kind of reminds me of some Clionadh shadows. There's a lot of color and shine in there, and it's definitely serving sheer wet look. You know, it's really high voltage. And I'm happy to see that. Curiously, Madrigal, which was the one that was so laden with promise of being like this grungy chartreuse, it ended up swatching and reading to me more like just a regular green metallic. I don't know what I was expecting. I mean, maybe this is where we like really unpack the difference between the fantasy and the reality, but because of the way that Lisa talked about this green, the way that it looked when she swatched it and when she used it on her eyes in her release video, she talked about it as like a blackened green, and I think that I was expecting there to be more nuance in the shade, like more of an actual black base, maybe more particulate matter, more grunge, more textural complexity, and really it's just a completely blended, creamy green eyeshadow. Maybe a tiny bit of smoke in the color of the green, you know? But compared to something like the Clionadh multi-chromes like Weathered and Gargoyle that are these greens that are just truly dimensional and truly do have an actual black base that buffs out when you start working with them, it struck me as much more middle of the road than what I was expecting. But it could also be that thing where it's like you think you're buying a piece of magic, but it turns out to be just eyeshadow. And that is, of course, what happened, you know? It feels like it's going to be magical, but it's just eyeshadow. As metallic green eyeshadows go, of course, it's like top notch. It's like a really, really, really good one. But of these two singles that I got, Mercurial is the one that I felt the most compelled to add to all my looks, like work with a lot. And it's one of the shadows of all of these, the two palettes and the two singles, that I like the most. Speaking of Mercurial, let's do some swatch comparisons. So I put a big swatch of Mercurial on my hand, and then I got out some comps. So we have Urban Decay Space Cowboy, Clionadh Chandelier, Clionadh Carving, and Clionadh Grisaille. Of the four comparisons here, I think that Clionadh Carving is the one that's the closest to dupe. Like it's an actual dupe. It has all of the same colors, kind of in the same balance as the Lisa Eldridge shadow. Chandelier has a lot in common with Mercurial, but there isn't as much lavender. Like there isn't that lavender flip there. And the other two are pretty dramatically different color-wise. I feel like the main takeaway from these swatches here is that you can see how shiny the Lisa Eldridge shadow is. In terms of shine, it holds its own against the Clionadh shades. It's just not as much the thing. You know what I mean? It doesn't have as much of the good stuff in it, not quite. But it really, really, really does hold its own. So if you're out there like wanting something like this, something like one of those Clionadh glitter multi-chromes, but you aren't going to make an order from Clionadh for some reason, and you're thinking about making a Lisa Eldridge order, I feel like you're definitely getting a little taste of that experience, of that kind of eyeshadow with Mercurial. So the way that I've been using Mercurial is the same way that I use that multicolored topper in Pat McGrath Moonlit Seduction. So I also got that out and swatched it. It's got much more red and purple in it. It's a lot more like Clionadh Grisaille. And I think too, it has just a little bit more textural dynamic than the Lisa Eldridge, just a little bit more, but you can again see how shiny the Lisa Eldridge is even next to a Pat McGrath shade. This is one of the most pleasing shadows in the entire collection, in my opinion. So for the green Madrigal, I just compared it to the green in the Pat McGrath Midnight Sun palette. They're not very similar. You can see that Madrigal is more foiled. It makes me think of the old Makeup Geek foiled eyeshadows, the green ones. And clearly there's sort of like a lighter green shift and a darker green. So there's a little bit more nuance than there is in the green in Midnight Sun. More nuance in like the foiled Reflect. They're not the same, but they have something in common. And also this will give you, if you have Midnight Sun, this will give you something to kind of compare this green to. It gives you like a benchmark from which to understand how light or dark and how shiny this Lisa Eldridge green is. The next comparison I'm showing you is between between Supernova, which is the luminous eyeshadow in the Vega palette, and the really, really shiny special shade in Midnight Sun. And I feel like this is a really good case in point for the fact that there's shiny and then there's shiny. When I first swatched the Vega palette, I was like, wow, Supernova, that luminous shade, it's so shiny. And it is shiny on the eyes. Like, it does read as pretty shiny. It's pretty shiny. But the Pat McGrath special shade is just shinier. It's like, what's shinier than being shiny? The Pat McGrath special shade. You can also see in the swatches that Supernova actually has a little bit of a pink quality compared to the extremely neutral Pat McGrath special shade there. And I think you can also see it in this comparison swatch how blended the Lisa Eldridge eyeshadows are. Even the ones that have texture satisfaction, they're just really finely milled, really, really blended. There's not a flakiness to the textural quality. Again, they all feel like they have quite a bit of some sort of medium mixed in them. And of course, the Pat McGrath special shades are famous for having no medium mixed in them, just being kind of like these baked sparkles. So quick comparison between Lisa Eldridge Moon Swirl and that pewter color in the Pat McGrath Moonlit Seduction palette, which is a bit darker and a bit more cool toned. Color-wise of the two, I think I like Moon Swirl better, but texture-wise, I like the Pat McGrath better. And speaking of texture, here's where poor Ritual really gets shown up. I'm comparing it here to the sheer shiny wet look gold topper in the Pat McGrath Moonlit Seduction palette. The Pat McGrath shadow here that I'm comparing to Ritual is billed as being exactly the same thing, right? They do, or they're supposed to do, exactly the same thing. And the Pat McGrath one is not for the faint of heart. You know what I mean? It's like, again, extremely reflective. Ritual is not even in the same stratosphere as this Pat McGrath shade. And for me, with my tastes, I want the shiny. And I think that you can kind of see here too in this swatch just how, not even compared to anything, but just on its own, how underperforming Ritual kind of is. Like, it's just not shiny. It's just not shiny. And this is like under studio lights that really do the most to create reflect in something. You could really see how it brought out the best in Supernova, the luminous Lisa Eldridge shade. This lighting, it really brings out the best in sparkly shadows. And Ritual, it's like, is it even there? Probably the biggest disappointment, actually, of the entire thing for me. Okay, so this is one in which I had a personal interest. One of my most used eyeshadows in the history of my collection randomly happens to be the shadow called 24/7 from the original Jaclyn Hill Morphe palette. I depotted it like 5 years ago, and I've kept that one shadow around because it has this creamy matte formula mixed with slight micro shimmers. And part of what attracts me so much about these seamless mattes and velvets, especially in these warm browns, is that they look like Jaclyn Hill 24/7. And I get along so well with that shadow and that formula because I find it really sturdy, really natural. There's something editorial about it. It's just like my perfect combination of qualities. I think of Jaclyn Hill 24/7 as being really red undertoned, like a brown that some red gets buffed out of it when you start working with it. And I wanted to see how similar it was to Deep Ochre from the Cinnabar palette, because to my mind, like in my memory, that's exactly what the Jaclyn Hill 24/7 shadow looks like. You can see that Deep Ochre, it's much more orange, right? It has more orange in it. The Jaclyn Hill one has a little more of that like yellowish brown. And it's just not as dimensional. And I feel like with this Jaclyn Hill palette, it's just a Morphe shadow. It's sort of a happy accident, you know what I mean? Once in a while, it's just randomly something really hits. The fact that this one shadow is, in my opinion, so amazing. But what you can really see here is that in the Lisa Eldridge shadow, even though there's nuance, everything's blended together. So it has a little bit more flatness, and the color is a little bit more mid-tone compared to the other shade, one of my favorites in my collection, that just has all of this nuance and dimension. The shine and the pigment interact in this kind of dynamic dimensional way. And the color, of course, is a little grungier, a little bit closer to center. I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily to have colors so blended and so integrated. And I think it's by design, and we'll get to that towards the end. It's just one of the things that I think is the most of note about these shadows, given my tastes, which my tastes are for sort of like flaky, surprising, dynamic, grungy things. And these are just the formulas are so blended and refined and within each pan so homogeneous. So I was trying to show the differences there by comparing them to some of the shades in my collection. And then finally, Lamp Black next to the blackest matte black in my collection, which is the black from the Kaleidos Sci-Fi Green palette, which doesn't have sparkle in it. There was a little bit of sparkle all over the place because of all the swatching I was doing. So some sparkle got it onto the pan and onto my finger when I was doing this swatch, but that's added sparkle. It's not actually a sparkly black. In use, this is just like a very, very saturated, very velvety, traditional matte black shadow that has an actual powder texture. And you can see what I'm talking about with Lamp Black being a slightly off black, like a slightly gray black. It doesn't lean blue, which I appreciate, but it just, compared to a very deep black, it leans a little bit charcoal, you know? And that's partly because of the creaminess of the formula. It is one of those seamless mattes. There's a little bit of sparkle mixed in. I think that reflect is disrupting the depth of the black. And as I've said, I think there's like a medium in there holding it together, making it creamy. And that is also kind of desaturating the black a little bit. So after testing these palettes and singles, swatching them, using them for a while, I popped them all out of their palettes and I rearranged them and just put my 6 favorites with a little bit of a nod to what I thought would make sense, like in terms of them all working together, into one palette. I made my perfect edit, and that's what I'm going to show you now. The easiest decision for me was about the metallic shades, or the shiny of any kind shades that I wanted to have all together in one little palette. Mercurial, which is that really high voltage single that I got that's from the Sorcery palette, super shiny, kind of multi-chromatic. It's been hard for me to complete a LISA Eldridge eyeshadow look without adding it. Like, it's the most useful and sort of the most Hannah thing that arrived in this entire order. So I was definitely going to include that. Moon Swirl, which is the really lovely neutral kind of taupe metallic from the Vega palette. That has been one of my most used shadows because one of my favorite things to do is to take a neutral bronzer, neutral taupe metallic, and put it all over my lids and buff it out and just have that be like the entire look. And then I also decided to include Supernova, the luminous shadow from the Vega palette, because it too is very, very shiny, very well performing. It's not exactly totally sheer, but it has that wet look reflect that means that I can use it on my brow bone or kind of to top looks to make the whole look wet. And it's sheer enough that it actually works that way. I've ended up using Supernova the way that I was expecting to use Ritual, and it delivers for me what I was hoping Ritual would deliver that Ritual failed to deliver. So I included it here in my custom palette as my topper, my wet look shadow. I had a little bit of a hard time deciding about the mattes. I thought I would include Lamp Black because one of the main draws to Vega for me is the fact that it has a black in it, and I love using black eyeshadow. But at the end of the day, I just couldn't pass up those creamy, slightly sheeny, ruddy earth, like mud, earth, dirt colors. So 2 of them are those really exciting shades from Cinnabar, the only 2 shades actually that I liked from Cinnabar. And then I also kept Turbulence, the seamless matte from the Vega palette, that slightly warm-leaning taupe, because I've actually ended up using that a lot. Like, I kept it for practical reasons. So I ended up with a really dynamic palette in terms of texture, and it's one that I feel compelled to use, like compelled to keep using, because it's offering both my comfort zone with Moon Swirl and Mercurial and Supernova, and it's offering this kind of like challenge, actually. This sort of like exciting challenge because, and now we're getting into part 3, the shadows in use, what they're like to put on the eyes. The reason that those creamy mattes are a bit of a challenge to me is that I just have had a hard time blending them out. And I really do think it's a matter of personal preference, a matter of what I'm used to, probably a matter of just how I conceive of eyeshadow and eye shapes and pigment and color and the relationship between all of these things. But I have ended up, when trying to blend the velvet formula all over my eyes and sort of buff it out and have like a blown out one shadow look, I've ended up with such patchy eyeshadow underneath my brows that I had to wipe it off and start over again. And I've also ended up in that situation with the seamless matte formula a couple of times too. It's been a real learning curve because they have that wet quality, that slightly damp, sort of putty-like quality, I have found that I just have to handle them with a little bit of care. I can't just like lay it down and go blendy, 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 and then it sort of blends itself and there's a seamless fade. I feel like what I have to do is to go carefully in layers, starting with the shape down on my lid and just building only a little bit at a time bigger than that. And then a little bit at a time bigger than that, a little bit at a time bigger than that. Always being really careful to soften and buff the edge of the shape that I'm creating before I add more shadow and build. I just can't be quite as cavalier as I am with some of my powder shadows because they work a little bit differently. And there's something about, I've been struggling to like articulate it and I've been worried that I wouldn't explain it clearly enough. I did get to the point where I'm able to get a great eye look with these no matter what. Like I've ridden the learning curve over to the point where I like can use them. You have to kind of treat them like cream eyeshadows. All of the matte, to me, all of the mattes, not just the velvets, but the seamless mattes as well. And I historically have struggled with cream and liquid eyeshadows. They tend to like set on my eyes before I finish blending them, make a harsh line. So again, it could be partly just user error, user preference, but I find that rather than that sort of slippy, seamless, slightly damp, putty, silicone-y quality causing them to be super easy to blend, like effortless to blend, which is sort of the claim and I think the reason for formulating them that way. For me, it caused a bit of a learning curve. The other thing about them is that because they have that very, very, very blended, slippy quality, the way that they layer on top of each other isn't exactly the same as it is with more powdery eyeshadows. Again, a little more like the lethal eyeshadows, if you've worked with them. The way they layer, because they all have that slidiness, very much lends itself to a seamless blend. So it's interesting, even though I've struggled to get it to be super, super seamless when I'm just putting one shadow all over my lid, when I go in with a darker shadow into my outer corner and start blending it in on top of another one that's already there, that will give me a very airbrushed, seamless, like the relationship between the two shadows will be extremely airbrushed looking, but I'll have to pack and pack and pack it on if I want to make it very, very dark in my outer corner because it's more about the softness and the blending than it is about the shade dynamic from light to dark. You know what I mean? It's not so much about the drama. It's very much about this like refined airbrushed look. I'll briefly say that the metallics perform perfectly, like flawlessly, top quality. The luminous shadow as well, flawless, perfect, top quality. The top coat Ritual gives me nothing, gives me absolutely nothing. But I think that people who want an extremely subtle layer of shine, like they want to add just a little bit of shine, but they don't want to call attention to it on the lids, will be really happy with Ritual. What I'm trying to say here is just that all of the shadows that have shine of any kind, I think do exactly what they're supposed to do. And even though I don't like Ritual, I think it does for me exactly what it's supposed to do. I haven't had any struggle with that. They're exactly what I expected. Like the perfect eyeshadows, you know? And I haven't watched anyone else's review of these eyeshadows, so I don't know if other people are having this experience like I am, but the matte formulas are distinct. They are distinctive. It's a really specific kind of eyeshadow that is really different from Pat McGrath, which is quite powdery, very pigmented, powdery in what is to me a good way. Like you dip your brush in and you know what you're dealing with, which is like extremely pigmented powder that blends beautifully, you know? And I can manipulate it. You know what I mean? I can like manipulate that powder on my lids and it always is completely true to color. That's more familiar to me. These creamy ones, it's like the difference between using charcoal, like what are those art supplies called? Pastels and crepa. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, so pastel, the art supplies that are pastels, they're like charcoal, sticks of charcoal that are dry, like dry pigment, really pigment rich. And they do blend together. They have like a softness, but there's like a powdery quality. If you press really hard, it'll like crumble, you know what I mean? And you can blend it together, but it's like chalk. They're like a regular pastel crayons, I guess. It's like a very high-end art supply version of just chalk, like the chalk you would use to draw on a chalkboard or something like that. Oil pastels, which are also called crepa, that was why I said that. Oil pastels have a lot in common with pastels, but there's more of an oily medium in them. So they're more likely to turn into sort of a cream when you press them down. These mattes, the seamless mattes and the velvet mattes, to me, they're kind of like, they are to Pat McGrath matte shadows and most most other matte shadows as oil pastels are to pastels. Honestly, that is literally the best. I might be being a little over dramatic, but no, they really are like that. You can even kind of see in some of the overhead swatches how they do that thing where they sort of compact into the pan. Not hard pan, because there's like a softness there, a movability, almost a moldability, but they really, really are different. They really, really are like the oil pastels of eyeshadows. And just like oil pastels have a lot of benefits to them, right? They're sturdier, they're more stable, they're a little like chalk pastels can be smudged easily, can be sort of dusted away a little bit more easily, whereas oil pastels feel a little bit more indelible, but they just don't blend as softly. You know what I mean? You can get a soft blend if you're careful and if you work at it, but they just don't blend as softly because they have that oil medium mixed in. That has been my exact experience with these eyeshadows. You can get that soft blend, but you just have to approach it in a different way. And then they have that kind of sturdiness. And again, that really beautiful sort of satiny sheen finish, that satisfaction of the way that they interact with pigment, just like oil pastels have. So let me go ahead, and having finally gotten it off my chest, exactly what the deal is with these, let me go ahead and roll the footage of myself applying this eye look today, because what I did was I started right in with Deep Ochre, which is one of the velvet shadows, was one of the cream to powders, and I just put it with my fingers and my brush all over both lids, and I blended it and blended and blended it out. And I did that because I wanted you to see what I'm talking about. I wanted you to see that I had to tinker and struggle a little bit to get it to be even, to get it to be the same on both eyes. I don't know if you'll be able to see this in the footage, but I felt a little tiny bit out of my depth compared to how it feels when I do that with most of my tried and true eyeshadows, just because the formula is so distinct, right? I got to the point, I think, in today's eye look just with that one eyeshadow where I could have just put on mascara and called it a day. And I stopped there and sort of vogued for a second so you could see what that would look like. The next thing that I did was just go into a little bit of Fired Earth and put it in my outer corner to deepen it out, smoke it out a little bit. And I think you can see in the application footage how it does that seamless, like, airbrushed blend thing, because it was like layering a seamless matte on top of the velvet. The creaminess of the two sort of blended together, and it just makes this soft, slidey, buffed out moment in the outer corner. Then I took Supernova on a brush, and I used that as I've been using it actually as my wet look topper. So I just buffed a little bit of it under my brow bone and around the edges of the shape that I had buffed out with Deep Ochre to kind of soften the edge and make it shiny and make my lids look a little bit greasy. So you can see how well that luminous shadow is working at that task. And then I had to finish it off with Mercurial because I think it's probably the most striking shadow in all of these. And again, it's the one that kind of completes this as the most classic, like, Hannah look. So we put that on the center of each lid with my finger and then buffed it out with a brush, and then added a tiny bit more to the center of each lid to make it really, really, really mirror-like in its shine. And I really like this look. I actually quite like the ruddy kind of red clay matte as the base with a reflective multichromatic sort of greeny lavender sheer wet look thing all over. I like the way that they look together. And I think it ended up looking very much like the looks that I do with my other eyeshadows, you know? My favorite kind of thing to do, I mean. I feel very myself. I feel like it came together. I feel like I didn't struggle too much, even though it was a little bit touch and go laying down that matte at the beginning. But I also feel like it's a little bit, how can I say this? Like a little bit undramatic. And this is how I've ended up feeling every time I've worn these eyeshadows for testing. I feel like on the spectrum of drama for an eyeshadow look, on one end, there's like an extremely light, elegant, effortless, like the kind of thing that you would see on an actual red carpet. Like, is it eyeshadow or is it just a little bit of dewiness on her lid? Like, or maybe she's just got a little bit of sleep in the corner of her eye from last night and she just looks naturally cute because she's a movie star. You know what I mean? Like those red carpet looks that are just so subtle, often done with like Chanel quads and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So there's that all the way on one side. And all the way on the other side, we have like the high drama, high voltage. For some people, that means like rich, saturated color, like super rich cobalt blue or green, or like think about the eye looks that Angie does. For me, that means like that super layered, grungy oil slick look where there's like black with like a sheen of oil spill shine on top of it. And there's also glitter and it looks greasy and it's a little bit multichromatic and the mascara is really thick and it just looks like it was poured on like tar. If those are the two ends of the spectrum, I feel like with Lisa Eldridge eyeshadows, because of the colors, the relationships between pigment and formula that we have in each one of the different formulas, how finely milled and blended the pigments are, and the sort of kind of the ceiling on saturation of the mattes that we have because of the medium. I feel like you can only get a look that's like between the movie star on the red carpet end of the spectrum, like the very lightest light of impactful eye makeup, and like 25 to 30% the way along. Maybe 50%. Let's be generous and say like 50%. But I feel like I only have access to like half of the spectrum of what I can do with an eye look with these shadows, no matter what I do. And because I love the thing on the other end of the spectrum, a lot of times when I've applied these, I've been angling at that. And I have been going out dancing a little bit, dancing tango finally for the first time in years. That's given me an opportunity to really do the most, because when you go out dancing, it's like it's dark, there's like low light, and I can really let loose with like super dramatic, really shiny looks on my eyes. And so there have been several times when I've been testing these eyeshadows because I'm going out tango dancing. So I sit down to like really do the thing, and I'm trying, and I can only get to the 50% mark in terms of like the drama and depth and intensity. I just can't get further than that because this makeup is designed for extremely refined looks. And I also think it's designed for mature skin, like to be as kind as possible to crepey lids, sagging lids, lids that are hard to apply makeup to, as flattering as possible to all different skin textures on the lids. Again, I think that the mattes are designed to blend really seamlessly and easily with each other, but because of that, they forfeit a little bit of that punch of depth. They forfeit that drama. The only choice with them is to stay like within that first half of the spectrum. And I think that the thing they are best at is like the first 10%. I think that these palettes, these eyeshadows are amazing for red carpet style makeup and people who do their makeup that way on a daily basis, like quite subtle, very, very tasteful, more like a slight design element or accessory to a look than like art supplies on the eyes. Now, the thing is, every time I've done that and like really pushed the limit of what these shadows can do in terms of drama, I've felt a little bit of like frustration while I'm trying to do the most. Like I hit the wall and I'm like, well, I guess this is the most that I can do. This is like the best I'm going to get. And then later in the evening, and a lot of times it's like at 1 a.m. after we get back from tango and I'm like about to take a shower, I look in the mirror and I'm like, slay. Like my eyes look beautiful. And the thing is that as I age, I'm more and more interested in those subtle qualities. I mean, I love the art supplies, eye makeup, but I actually do feel like really comfortable in that space, in that 50%, even in that first 10%. So because I'm testing this makeup and I'm like trying to push it to its limits, sometimes I feel constrained in my abilities and a little bit like I don't have my go-to, like those powdery mattes that you can use to like cover up anything or blend anything or deepen up the outer corner so it's like as black as a black hole. So I feel the lack of those crutches when I'm using it, but then the end result ends up being something that is actually like right up my alley. And so I have kind of come around to feeling like it's a real success. This launch and these formulas, I've come around to feeling like they're very successful because I always feel like my eyes look really beautiful and they're also quite sturdy. I mean, I've been putting them through the ringer dancing tango in them, literally like pressing my face against people's sweaty faces. The only thing that's ever smudged dancing in these is my mascara a little bit from time to time, but that tells you something, right? I've had dances where I've smudged my mascara, but the eyeshadow itself has stayed intact. So I think I've been giving my final thoughts for a while now. I'm going to shift officially into part 4 of the video, eyeshadow final thoughts, because I do have one extremely clear, cohesive package in terms of like a way that I offer you to think about this makeup. If you haven't tried it yet, if you're curious about it, considering buying it, and you enjoy makeup or you have some reference points for makeup and you kind of want to know where it's positioned. Position it in your mind in the same room as Tom Ford quads, Chanel quads. That's it. Tom Ford quads and Chanel quads. I've never tried them. I've never tried a Tom Ford quad or a Chanel quad, but I know how we as makeup lovers think of them and makeup users. I know how we think of them, right? We think of them as eyeshadow for like refined, lightweight looks. The kind of thing, again, that you would see on the red carpet, that you would see on a movie star at an event. Not the art supplies, not the rich cobalt blue. There's editorial makeup that goes in the direction of Isamaya, you know what I mean? Like gloss gloss and grease and drama. And there's editorial makeup that goes in the direction of a kind of classiness, refinement, subtlety, a wearability that's also tinged maybe with like wealth, sort of like the eye look looks like the makeup cost a lot, even though it's just a quad, like that kind of editorial or celebrity makeup. That is where these eyeshadows are positioned because of their formulas, because of the color stories, because of the way they perform on the eyes. And it makes total sense because that's the kind of makeup that Lisa Eldridge does. Those are her clients. Kate Winslet on the red carpet. That's what she does. And she designed palettes that are going to serve that exact work and those exact looks, that type of makeup, that vibe to the furthest possible extent. But that means that there are some things that you can't do with it. And I just didn't know that from her release video, from seeing the swatches. I didn't really know that. I think that I was perhaps under the impression that it was a little more punchy in the way of like a modern makeup YouTube. But Lisa Eldridge, she only has like 1 foot in makeup YouTube. You know, like makeup YouTube is just one of the things she does. A lot of what she does is like creative direction for a massive makeup company. Again, makeup for celebrities, for like mainstream events. She's very in the world in terms of practical application of makeup, hands-on application of makeup. And I think that in the YouTube makeup community, we were much more sort of skewed towards art supplies and pigment and crushiness and the blackest black and like the smokiest smoky eye and the absolute drama. That's not really Lisa Eldridge's makeup world. So it totally makes sense that this makeup wouldn't be that. There have been some times over the course of my career testing makeup when I have run up against this thing where I'm like, oh, it's not doing what I am trying to push it to do, but the eye look is coming out really pretty. It's just pretty in this much more everyday wearable kind of way. Like I had that experience when I reviewed the Victoria Beckham eye brick. I was just like, why isn't it giving? Like, why isn't it serving? But then when I used it the way it was intended, it was like, oh, it's actually really pretty. It's just, I just don't usually do my eye makeup like this. Now, those eyeshadows in terms of texture are very different from these. I'm not trying to compare them in terms of how they perform. Just it's like in terms of what they're intended to do. Like this makeup is for the Victoria Beckham customer, the Tom Ford customer, the Chanel makeup customer. And if that's what you want, if that's you, you're going to love it. But if you're more like the Pat McGrath customer of indie brands, indie eyeshadows, even a Natasha Denona aficionado, I would actually say, if that's more your vibe, just know that if you choose one of these, you buy one of these, it's kind of like you're picking up a Chanel quad just to see what it would be like to have something in your makeup arsenal that's a little bit more lightweight in that way, you know, like a little bit more like designed for red carpet makeup. So those are my final thoughts on these eyeshadow palettes. I hope that I've been thorough enough. Let us briefly discuss the lipsticks. When I filmed the overhead swatch footage, I had already played with Sorcery. I had already like applied it to my lips. So the first one that I showed you a close-up of is Velvet Affair, which is again, not a very recent Lisa Eldridge release, but one that I've always been curious about. I showed you the close-up of that bullet because it was unswatched at the time, completely untouched. And I wanted you to see what these lipsticks look like when they are brand new, because it really is a sight to behold. They're beautiful. I think Velvet Sorcery is the one that most of you are the most curious about. So I gave you a good, rich swatch. It is a lovely, I would say, ever so slightly grungy dark rose, ever so slightly. And this is a good example of like something that is like the grungiest that Lisa Eldridge ever gets. And that's like so in the center of normalcy in terms of what I consider to be grungy, because I'm over here coveting things like Maybelline Gone Greige, Gucci, A Royal Scandal, which is just, those are like truly gray toned browns, or Gone Greige is like a purple toned greige. And I feel like Velvet Sorcery, I was hoping it would be a little bit edgier, honestly. In reality, on me, it's kind of like a straight down the middle, like deep rose lipstick with maybe like a drop of Gone Greige, 2 to 5% Gone Greige added. But it is a very pretty color, and it is kind of unique for me. However, Velvet Affair intrigues me a little bit more because I feel like it has a very gratifying and unusual combination of tones in it. It's kind of like, is it peach or is it brown or is it rusty or is it rosy, you know? And I like that. I like that intrigue. I took this footage before I had fully decluttered my lipsticks, and so the comparison lipstick that I ended up grabbing is one that I've since decluttered. But I think it's a really good comp because it's drugstore drugstore lipstick that I know that a lot of people have tried. It's Maybelline Rum Raisin. And it has a lot in common with both of them, right? It kind of ties them together. If you have Rum Raisin, if you've ever worn it, then I think you can see from these swatch comparisons the way in which Velvet Affair is a departure from that. It's like a little bit more in the rust direction and a little bit lighter, actually. And you can see that Velvet Sorcery is similar in a lot of ways, but a little bit more purple. Putting Rum Raisin down really shows off that kind of grayish purple drop that's in Velvet Sorcery. They're both really pretty colors. I always want everything to be grungier than it is, but they're both really pretty colors. I'll apply them for you now. There's Velvet Sorcery at full pigment. It's pretty vampy on me, you know, which isn't my most worn look. I'm not usually out here wearing such a vampy lip. I think in terms of the depth of this color, it's kind of middle of the road for Lisa Eldridge, like in the middle. And on me, it's quite dark. So there it is, blotted down, which is actually how I've been wearing it. Like every time I've actually worn it, I've worn it like this. This is like a really great, soft, wearable matte formula. They're great lipsticks. I don't feel like I need to go into the formula because they've been reviewed up, down, and all around town by everyone, and they're great. Blotted down, it's interesting. Velvet Sorcery, it's very like my lips, but slightly more saturated for me. You can see actually that it's very similar. Sorry if this is gross, but it's very similar to the color of my flesh, like my lip. It's kind of similar to the color of my lips, actually. This just reads to me like a pretty deep rose. Let's take a look at Velvet Affair. Okay, this to me does kind of have a frisson of specialness about it. I actually haven't really been testing this one. I've been focusing on Sorcery because it's like the one that was released with these eyeshadow palettes. This one's old news in the Lisa Eldridge world, but this feels much more special to me because on me, it's a shade of red. It's a really, really rusty red, and it's like a cream terracotta. It has depth, you know what I mean? It has like a curious quality. There it is, blotted down, and again, I think it's still really reading as like a shade of red lipstick on me, but it's a shade of red lipstick that I really like, kind of like a matte brick. Of the two of them, this is the one that I prefer, but I think that they're both really pretty. Okay, I've been filming for like a year, and I feel that I've said all that I am going to say today, but I will try to remember to report back about these, to come back in a future video and let you know how these lipsticks have fared in my collection, if I've decided to actually keep them or if I've given them away. Same with the eyeshadows and the eyeshadow palettes. I'm not actually sure at this very moment what I will do because I'm so into keeping an edited collection right now. I hope you were able to get what you came for from this video, whatever that was. I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't yet subscribed. I really hope you're remembering to take extra good care of yourself so that you can be the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world.